So basically, I mean, like this, it's kind of like most of the other podcasts we've done. It's kind of free flowing, you know. There's not really anything that specific. It's kind of whatever you want to talk about with regards to horror, you know. I mean, what really interests me, what we're kind of, what the sort of, if there is a focus for this entire project, it's influence, you know.
Sure. Yeah,
it's what I went into with Kit, and certainly with the videos that I've already done for the new channel, the Our Lives in Horror channel, is what is it? What experiences and influences shaped who we are? You know, what is it that made us so interested in the material that we're interested in, and made like fed our imaginations? That transformed them into the shapes they are. I mean, I know that you're a huge M.R. James fan, for example.
Yeah, that's like a key influence of mine. But I was kind of I was into M.R. James before I knew who that was.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Do you know? So, like, I think you get a lot of that with Lovecraft in particular. I think a lot of people love what we would refer to as Lovecraftian horror, right?
Yeah.
But they might not even know that that's what it is. They just know that they love this cosmic horror, like Alien is a good example, or The Thing, or anything like that. You're like, oh, I love that kind of creeping dread where there's these ancient alien things that dwarf our understanding of the universe. All of that, they love that, but they've never heard of H.P. Lovecraft as an author who kind of invented that. So,
I mean, was that the case for you?
With Lovecraft, sort of, except I did come to him quite early. Because I remember being a teenager and getting just a, you know, like when you go to like a charity shop or something, or a book sale, and there's loads of books for like 40 pence, and you like the covers. So I remember getting some Lovecraft ones at about 13, 14, that just because they were really great. They had these covers on them that looked like they were like clay models of Lovecraft monsters, like almost like Harryhausen sort of ones.
Oh, I've not seen those. I'm gonna have to seek those out.
Next time you come over, just remind me, because they're on my bookcase. And
yes. Oh, I'd love. I mean, that's actually something that happens with Lovecraft books, isn't it? They almost universally, whatever edition they are, have amazing covers, very attractive covers.
So Lovecraft himself, I knew pretty early on, but the with M.R. James, I was massively into the kind of thing that he writes all along, really. I mean, how far back do you want me to go here? Shall I start at the very beginning of that?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. As early as you can. Like, what you know, is there like a formative experience you can remember?
Yeah, sort of. So, first and foremost, horror is, or even before you would call it horror necessarily, sort of like monsters and ghosts and the supernatural and graveyards and creepy forests and swamps and stuff. That's always been my thing.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're a very young kid, you kind of come in and out of different things, right? Like this year it might be Transformers, and then the next year He-Man, and then it's the Power Rangers and whatever. But despite whatever kind of the media is throwing at you in terms of a new franchise, for most children, there's always something, some baseline that you're always into. There's
a core, isn't there? There is
exactly. It might be sports, it might be football, it might be wrestling, it might be monster trucks. It's that thing where when it's your birthday, you've got an auntie or uncle who doesn't see you that often, and they want to get you a present, but they're not risking getting you something from Transformers because they got you that last year, but you might not be into that. But there's always that one thing that they know if they get you something from that,
it's a safe bet.
Yeah. That was always my thing. Monsters, horror, ghosts, creepy castle stuff, anything like that.
Likewise.
My core thing. No matter what else I was into, you could guarantee if you got me a toy of Dracula or the Wolfman or something, I'd be over the moon with that. That was
Did you do that thing when you were a kid, like as you know, when you were having like the fads? I had that too, definitely. Like the fads on one franchise or another, where because of the nature of your inclinations and your interests, you kind of eked out the darkness in the franchises. You sort of erred towards the darker elements of the franchises anyway.
Yeah, I when I think about any of the franchises I loved as a kid, whether it's He-Man as a good example, or Transformers or anything like that, I always liked the villains better.
Yes.
I thought Skeletor and Snake Mountain and all that was far more interesting to me than what the Masters of the Universe was.
I always knew the relatives that knew me well for like birthdays and whatnot, because the ones that knew me well would get me a Decepticon. You know what I mean?
I had vastly more Decepticons than Autobots, that kind of thing. Yeah.
They are the best. They're so much better than the Autobots. It is like He-Man, isn't it? You know, the villains have got all the tunes, right?
They're just so much more interesting. They're just, even the designs of them are so much more. You know, I mean, you've got like Beastman, who's like this like almost lycanthropic sort of creature who can control wild animals, and he's got like an army of wolves and monsters. That's so much more interesting than Ram Man, a bloke with a metal head.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I totally get that.
You know, and then you've got Merman and Trapjaw. Trapjaw's an amazing design, and you know, you could do a proper like movie, like Cronenbergian design of Trapjaw, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think you know, most of the He-Man designs, like certainly for the villains, lend themselves to that quite well.
Well, Skeletor, given that in most adaptations his face is literally belted off.
Yes.
He doesn't naturally look like that. He used to look like a human, and his face got blown off.
Yeah.
If you took the hood down and you'd still have remnants of sort of charred flesh around the edges of the bone, you could really go to town with that.
Well, they started to lean into that towards the later incarnations of Skeletor. You know, when the line was kind of failing, and you got the later incarnations that had cybernetic elements to them.
I had one with like a glowing hand.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he had loads of like, he kind of had a body horror thing going on where there were like bits of metal and wires and stuff like that, and that fed into like the design that was in the New Adventures of He-Man, the sort of cosmic Skeletor.
Yes, very similar. There was one toy in the sort of the last line of the normal sort of traditional style He-Man figures, and the Skeletor that I got from that, I remember getting it from, I think it was in Spain or Portugal.
Oh,
certainly never saw it in the UK. The one I got from that was this sort of like cybernetic Skeletor, and then they did the New Adventures cartoon set in the future, and the toys from that were completely different.
Lex, do you still have that toy?
I think I've got it somewhere, but it's got none of the bits.
Oh, it's worth a lot of money, that is. It's worth a lot of money, that is. It was released towards the end of the original line, but only in that's it. But only in very limited like areas. Like it was only available in Europe, bizarrely.
I said Spain or Portugal or something. Oh. But I was always that kid who I always used to lose accessories because I wanted the character. Because like getting a new character, whatever the franchise was, it was like, you know, when you're like on a video game, like a big open world game, like The Witcher or Red Dead Redemption or Dark Souls or something, and you have a map and it's kind of, there's bits of it fogged out, but then once you get a certain key or an item, that kind of opens up that area of the map. For me, like whenever I buy a new character figure, that like unfogged an area of that map, because now I can play all adventures with them in it. You know, so like I didn't have them before, but now I do. So I was never bothered about, oh, he's got punching action or he's got a light up weapon. I'd lose that shit in a week.
Yeah,
but the character was what I wanted. You know.
I know exactly what you mean. I was exactly the same. Like what attracted me to certainly to toys and toy franchises was like the mythologies. It was the characters. It was the bios.
That's the thing, and I really loved. Like I remember, I've still got this in fact, but the Snake Mountain playset was really like I use that in all sorts of toy games, not just He-Man. I remember putting like I've still got it somewhere. Actually, I'm looking at it. It's on my shelf. I've got like a really old toy of Dracula that I'm getting.
Yeah,
I remember having him in that castle more than once. Yeah, because there's all these details in it, like these like petrified faces carved into it, like you know, almost as if there's like giants frozen into it. And then there's like a pit full of monsters that you fall into, like snakes and tentacles and stuff. And
it's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, like
stuff which you never really see in the cartoon, but
But for developing imagination, it's incredible, isn't it? You kind of like, I do recall like toy sets like that. I mean, a really good example of this is the Mighty Max series.
Oh yeah,
they had all of that shit. You know, all of that environmental shit that was totally redundant. You know, it didn't do anything. It's just there.
But the faces in the Snake Mountain remind me of I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in DC Comics, there's this concept called the Source Wall. If you've ever heard of that?
No, I don't know that one.
Which is this idea that around the very edge of the the universe in itself, there is this massive wall which prevents you from traveling to whatever lies beyond it.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that's basically, you go beyond that and you'd find God or whatever you want to.
Right. Like an entirely other condition. Yeah.
Yeah. Characters like Darkseid are forever trying to break into it and get.
Yeah, of course.
But that wall is populated with like the frozen like stone remains of all the universal tyrants over the year who've tried to break through it.
Right.
So like there's these like stone, what look like statues in agony, sort of frozen into it of various alien, like, you know, all your Thanos type characters in DC who at some point have tried to get through it. And they're now part of it as part of their punishment. They're like gargoyles in that wall now.
Wow.
And that always sort of reminds me of the Snake Mountain playset, because that's got all these little weird little faces all over it, which just aren't on the cartoon version at all. But
for like
it's fantastic.
Oh, it's awesome, isn't it? That kind of thing for like a developing imagination is wonderful, because you, as a child, you immediately start weaving narrative, right?
Yeah, and that was always a thing for me, stories, which is why I never got into sports, because there's no story there.
Yeah,
I like a story. I like something where I can build a narrative out of it. And I like sports as in going outside and kicking a football around and stuff. But in terms of sitting down and watching a football match, that was never a thing.
It's a bit Teflon for me. I can't get any traction on it. Do you know what I mean? It's not to denigrate it at all. For those that it speaks to, it speaks to them grand, you know.
But it's just not for me.
It doesn't have like that. Again, I think it does come down to whatever your your very early formative influences are ultimately that shapes like where your intrigues lie. And if it's not there, it's not there. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, that was. It was always monster stuff. I've always anything that had that in, and there were quite an abundance when you start thinking about it. There were quite a lot of cartoons that kind of led that way.
Yeah, like the 80s and the 90s were fantastic for that.
Yeah, you've got your obvious ones like your Scooby-Doo, but then you've got things like you had obviously the Ghostbusters cartoon. You also had things like Little Dracula. I remember that one.
Yeah, I remember. I used to read the original books.
Yeah. When
I was very young, used to get them out of the library, but that was kind of gruesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one, and just like the imagery of it. Even if I find a lot of things, particularly Scooby-Doo was one for this. I could care less about the kids solving mysteries, but I always used to love the locations. You know, like, is it a creepy carnival, or is it a swamp, or is it an abandoned mine? Or I used to love all of that. Whether or not I could care less about. Oh, it's some old guy trying to do insurance fraud or something.
Yeah. You know? And of course, I mean, like, ultimately, the stories in certainly the earlier Scooby-Doo are totally redundant, because it's exactly the same story over and over again, isn't it?
At no point does it occur that maybe this is someone trying to get money as opposed to
you kind of, towards the end of the season, you kind of want them to just stop, don't you, and say, look, we know you're not a ghost or a haunt, some sort of resurrected diver or whatever, so pack it in, all right?
Yeah, you wanted to cut it on straight away, but then you also had things like Trapdoor as a scene.
Oh my god, yeah, Trapdoor. That, I think for a lot of us, because we're kind of a very similar age, I do think Trapdoor may have been one of those, like, the very one of the bits of media that seeded these influences in us.
Yeah,
because all of them are there. You go back and watch Trapdoor now, and it's bloody hilarious, by the way. Trapdoor's amazing. It stands up so well to an adult viewing, but it's also got all the horror stuff too.
It has. I mean, the very concept of the forbidden door, there's a thing that you're not supposed to open it, and you don't really know what's in it. No. You never really get a specific answer about that.
The only time you ever see down the trapdoor, they very cleverly obscure it, so it's all very dark, and whatever you see down there occurs in shadow for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's kind of distressing. There's this one episode where Burke has a nightmare about falling down the trapdoor, and it's pretty scary. I've got to say, it's pretty weird and creepy. There are like
there's an escalation here, right? Because Burke and the other characters, even the guy upstairs who you never see, are already monsters.
Yes, yeah.
This is a world where there's a talking skull head, a giant spider, whatever the hell Burke's meant to be. they're already monsters themselves, and
Yeah.
yet whatever is down there is so dreadful.
It's so much worse, right? It's so much worse. What I love about the him upstairs thing is that you only ever see bits and pieces of him in like very, very few episodes, and you get little descriptions of him, so you know that he's massive. He's like ginormous. You know that he's got more than one head. He's got multiple eyes in those heads. His teeth are like gigantic and sharp. He can fly. He's got wings, and you know that his eyes can pop out. He's like way worse than anything down in the trapdoor. I think that's kind of one of the central ironies of the show. You know.
Yeah, because he's intelligent as well, whereas whatever's down there kind of isn't.
They're kind of monsters, aren't they? They're just animals, aren't they? But it's almost like when on the rare occasions when they do go down the trapdoor, when you see down the trapdoor, it's almost like another dimension.
Yeah,
it is.
It's like a TARDIS. It's way bigger down there than it reasonably should be.
Absolutely, and you see things like nests of Lovecraftian tentacles and things, and it's like freaky nightmare imagery rendered in plasticine. You know.
It is. I don't know if you saw this when you came over, but I've got a little toy of Birkin Bones.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I do. That show is one of my absolute favourites. I have very fond memories of seeing that, like having a VHS of Trapdoor.
I don't know if we had it or if it was one that we used to rent on a regular basis, but yeah. So but this is the sort of thing I mean, you see, those are the things that I would always watch. You know, other things would come and go, but those sort of things, I was always into that.
Yeah.
And then one of the very first books I remember reading of my own accord, as opposed to your mum reading it to you, because we used to do that, was this book, and I've still got it, and I think it's called Terror Tales, and it's like a hardback book, and it's got like a little green goblin little character on the front.
Yeah,
and it's 3 different ghost stories, and it's like illustrated ghost stories with beautiful artwork, and the stories are all very, very different in tone. But they're not kids' ghost stories. They're kind of kids' ghost stories in the way that nobody gets mutilated and there's nothing, language or anything. But it's not like a silly little ghost story about, a little ghost who, pinches someone on the bum or whatever. It's like legitimate hauntings,
So these are like sincere horror stories for kids, yeah?
Yeah, the first one, the one with the goblin in, is about a guy who goes into a house and is told to obey some sort of certain rules. I forget what, and he doesn't, so it's like an Irish thing, so he gets cast by this goblin.
It's almost like a folk tale, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. There's another about this woman who the local villagers say is a witch and transforms herself into a hare at night, and no one believes it until one day someone shoots a hare, and then that woman's seen hobbling through the village with a...
Oh, that's very M.R. James, isn't it? That's like, that could have come from the pages of M.R. James, that could.
It really could. And then the last one is about this woman who has this great big massive Irish wolfhound, and there's these burglars in village who are constantly trying to get into her house because she's got valuable stuff, but they daren't because of this dog. But then the dog dies, so one night they're trying to sneak in, and they both hear and see the shadow of a massive dog and run off. Dead, but they reveal that the dog actually died a week ago. Is after you see this.
Oh, I see. Right. So it's almost like retrospective horror.
Yeah, but like these are like legitimately good ghost stories.
Yeah.
And I just remember reading that over and over again as a kid. And then, of course, I got the book of the same series. It was like an abbreviated version of A Christmas Carol, which became a massive sort of thing for me. And I would read that and watch all the film adaptations of it rather every year, because that was still it's one of my favourite stories.
That's a key influence, isn't it?
It is, because it's like it's a proper ghost story, but it's done with a purpose, and the purpose isn't just isn't this scary? There's the ghosts are kind of part of a larger narrative there, and I always like that as well, where it's not just about making you scared. It's about there is a story here, and this story happens to have ghosts in it.
Yes, so there is subtext, right? There is a wider resonance to what is being explored here. I mean, of course, that goes back to the very origins of ghost stories and the notions of ghosts in and of themselves,
Yeah,
there's always
then is as big a thing as the ghost itself, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, going back to M.R. James, there is a quote in one of the M.R. James stories. I'll get to M.R. James in a minute, but there's a quote in the Whistle story where someone asks the protagonist, do you believe in ghosts? And he says, I never know how to answer that because you don't know what you're being invited to believe in.
Yeah.
If someone asks me, do I believe in Australia? I think he says, this is in the TV adaptation. Do I believe in Australia? Well, I know exactly what you're asking me there, and I can answer whether I believe in Australia or not. But you ask me, do I believe in ghosts? Well, there's a million different things you might be asking, depending on what your personal belief about a ghost and what even a ghost is. So it's not an easy question to answer, and that is a very good point because ghosts, even in fiction, there's like even within fiction by the same author, what a ghost actually is and what that means, it can vary so drastically from one story to the next.
Enormously. And of course there's also a time-based element to what ghosts are and mean as well. Like if you asked like someone from say ancient Greece what a ghost was and asked someone from present day United States or the UK, the answers would be vastly different.
Yes, because I think it's funny how ghosts simultaneously are a source of horror and comfort.
Yeah, it's an odd thing, isn't it?
It's odd because, like, on the one hand, you're like, "Oh God, there's a ghost in my house. That's scary." But on the other hand, that means there's an afterlife, which means there's an afterlife.
Absolutely. By their very nature, there is something miraculous about the notion of ghosts, right?
Yeah.
It does mean that there's a supernatural dimension to reality. It means that it does mean that there is something other than what we currently preconceive, and that is in and of itself kind of hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah, so even if the ghost you particularly are being haunted by happens to be an arsehole, that means your dead gran might also exist somewhere as a ghost. So there's it kind of comes with it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like, this particular ghost is a negative thing, but the fact that it exists in the first place means that in some form you continue after death in this reality. So
I think it was Ogden Nash who wrote that wherever there's a monster, there's a miracle.
Yeah,
and that's
fair point. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. You know, it's
like I discovered that the Loch Ness monster was real, even if you got attacked by it on a boat. I mean, being attacked by it on the boat is terrifying, but the fact of a dinosaur actually still existing is pretty wondrous.
There's an awe inherent, isn't there? That, like, mingling with whatever terror or existential dread you might be feeling, there is also awe. I mean, I'm sure we must have discussed this before, but one of the things I've always said is I would love to encounter a ghost. I just would. A spectre, an actual...
Yeah, undeniable, straight up, full-on manifestation in front of you that you cannot explain away as anything. Yeah. It would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Or anything related to that. So like a folklorish entity or a demon or something like that. Fantastic. Yes. Let me see that. Let me see it, I mean, if you go down the Lovecraftian end of that spectrum, then seeing it might drive you mad, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about the Lovecraftian stuff is I always think that's quite a good way of not having to worry too much about describing the monster.
Yeah, it's very useful in that regard. As a writer, it's a kind of useful thing, isn't it? Because you can describe in vagaries, and in fact, it's more effective when you do describe in vagaries.
Yeah, I think sometimes seeing the thing is worse. Not that necessarily the design of it's bad, but just it can't compete with the idea of being something.
No, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it is the case that sometimes the florid description of the entity is beautiful and really interesting. I mean, that happens in Lovecraft quite a lot. He can get very, very detailed. I mean, so one of the tricks that he sometimes uses is that he chucks so much detail at you that you can't picture it clearly, and that's deliberate. Right?
Do you know what that reminds me of when you're reading one of them descriptions on Father Ted? There is that alleged beast on the moors. Dougal's describing it, and the description that he gives is so bullshit. You cannot piece together what it is that he's describing.
Yeah. That's such a brilliant episode. I think Mrs. Doyle says it's something like a giant fox.
And he's like, oh, it's got, instead of a face, it's got 4 arses, and it's got an irrational fear of stamps. And he's just giving all these random qualities, and you could not put that together as an image. But that's kind of like what Lovecraft does.
It kind of is, isn't it? It's like when he describes the old ones in at the Mountains of Madness, and you are left. I mean, this is why there are so many different artists' depictions of these creatures, and they're all markedly different. Yeah. Because you just cannot get a grasp on what he's trying to describe, even though he provides really specific details. Yeah, it's kind of a clever trick.
Your brain just can't put it together because it's things that shouldn't go together.
Right,
it doesn't look like anything that we've seen, does it? I mean, if you're reading a novelization of King Kong, what is it? Well, it's a gorilla, but it's like 20 times bigger than a gorilla should be. Well, that's easy enough to picture, isn't it?
Easy enough. But when you've got these entities that are like cucumber shaped with starfish feet and starfish heads and multiple sets of wings at irregular intervals down their bodies and tendrils sprouting from all right. Yeah. Okie dokie is the only thing you can say, really, isn't it?
Yeah, which is good. I do like that trick. But so just to go back to MR James. So my first sort of experience with that was, again, it was already a thing. Right? Everyone sort of in my family already knew that I was into that kind of thing. So my granddad used to decide that he used to want to tell me ghost stories, and the ghost stories that he used to tell were either a mix of stuff he'd just made up, or maybe like adaptations of things he'd seen on television or read or whatever. Just anything to, you to entertain this child who kept asking for ghost stories. So, and the one he used to tell the most, and that I used to ask to hear over again, was what I would learn in later years, the story Whistle and I'll Come to You.
Right, so the almost
familiar with it. Yeah. I'm sure most people who would listen to this would be familiar with it, but just on the off chance that you're not, it's a very simple premise. It's about a guy who goes to like a beach resort in the UK to do ostensibly some golfing, but he's like a bit of an amateur archaeologist, and he's heard that there is a storehouse hidden beneath the shore somewhere for the sort of like the Vatican Knights when they went on the Templar thing, when they went on the Crusades, when they used to steal loads of heathen items from, the countries that they invaded. They used to hide them and lock them in these vaults, and that vault is still there somewhere. So that's your background. So this guy is just amateur sort of archaeologist. He finds in that rough sort of area an old whistle that has an engraving on it that's in Latin, and it says, "Who is this? Who is coming?" And he blows on that, and then immediately starts feeling as if someone's watching him, getting closer and closer and closer all the time, always out of the corner of his eye. He never full on sees it until the very end, when it kind of manifests in the bed next to him in a hotel room. Yeah. Which is, I believe, where we get the idea of the sheet ghost from. I'm not aware of any earlier examples than that. I might be wrong.
Is that what it derives from?
I am not aware of any older ones, but I could be wrong there.
That's really interesting, because I've always felt like, it shouldn't work, should it? You know what I mean? No. It's one of those weird things, because it's so cliche. It's so and so sort of like ingrained in cartoon culture.
It is. But this is the thing. If you take that image out of your head, the Scooby-Doo thing, and you imagine you're in a hotel room, know the bed next to you is empty, and then someone sits up under the covers. That's fucking terrifying.
It really is. And in like the BBC adaptation, and in the original short story, actually, it really is horrific.
It is. It's absolutely terrifying, the imagery that they do there, and it works because even before that, there's like a precursor to it. Before it manifests, when he goes downstairs in the hotel room in the morning, the hotel maid says, "Which bed do you want us to make up tonight?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, it looks like you've slept in both of them." That's disturbing immediately, isn't it? You were in that room on your own, and yet someone slept in the bed. That's so you never really find out. He takes the whistle back, but it doesn't suggest that. He chucks it into the sea, doesn't he? But that doesn't suggest that that's got rid of it.
No, and if you take other M.R. James ghost stories that have a very similar premise, often like putting back the cursed artifact or getting rid of it doesn't work.
Yeah, the warning to the curious with the 3 crowns
doesn't work.
Does it? It's like, now you're too late now. You know where.
And in fact, that one's pretty horrific as well, because that one's got like real violence in it too. You know.
Yeah, but so yeah, my granddad used to tell me a version of that story, and I would ask for it over and over again. And I suspect that some of the other stories he told me that I can't quite remember now would have been inspired by M.R. James as well.
Was he a reader of M.R. James, or did he encounter them via like those BBC adaptations?
He probably did. He was very much a big reader of horror. He used to love his horror stuff, and a big watcher of horror. I've said this to you before, but his favourite editor, he combined everything he loved in monsters, science fiction, and like.
That's brilliant.
But he was a big fan of ghost stuff and anything like that. It was really like his thing. So obviously when I got into that, he must have been overjoyed, because it's like, yes, I can talk to my grandson about that.
But so
I don't know where he came across the story, but he obviously remembered it to such a degree. Because this was like the days when it was on like DVD, where you could watch it over and over. He'd obviously seen it in the 60s and remembered if it was the film, you know?
That's fascinating, because that means like it means that you kind of have a sentimental attachment to ghost stories, right? To very sort of positive associations with these ghost stories.
Yeah, very much. I can't read that story or watch that adaptation without thinking of my granddad telling it me.
Wow,
it's. I mean, to that degree, I've got a few tattoos, and they're all sort of literary inspired one way or another. I've got a tattoo of the whistle on
my chest. Wow.
Yeah, which is from my granddad, and it's got the quote underneath. But,
that's superb.
Yeah, I can't divorce that story from him at all. Similarly, on sort of jumping forward a bit with the horror interest, one of my favourite things to watch as a young teenager was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which we're going to do an episode of your podcast about.
We are indeed.
But I used to watch that with my granddad, because I knew he'd like it. So when I started watching it, I thought my granddad would like this. So I started buying it on video, and then I'd take it up to his house once a week, and we'd watch it. And he got massively into it. He really loved that show. It was like his favourite thing to watch. And
that's superb.
Yeah, he was very sort of forward thinking in the sense that he didn't like old stuff. You know,
that's like really interesting.
This image of old people where you go around their house and they're still listening to Glenn Miller, and all the films they watch are still black and white, and all that. No. He wanted, like, he was one of the first people I knew to buy a DVD player when they come out.
Brilliant.
He was always he sadly didn't live long enough for sort of like the internet to become a common thing.
Yeah,
it was a thing, but not like something that everyone had on the phone or whatever, you know. But yeah, he would have had that. It'd have been one of those like Silver Surfers, as they call them, if he lived that long. Yeah, he was massively into modern tech and modern cars and films and everything. His way of seeing it was that like pop culture in particular was just getting better all the time. He didn't have this idea that things used to be great and now they're shit. He wasn't that sort of he had a healthy respect for stuff from the past and liked it, but he was very embracing of new films, new actors, new music, and all that.
So very, very unique guy for his generation. Very unusual, right?
He was, but he wasn't. So it's difficult to explain this without inadvertently offending people, because I know that times were very different to then.
Yeah.
Because what I was going to say, he wasn't insular in the way that a lot of older people are.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people from his generation, probably sort of like born and died in the same village.
Yes.
But that's not a bad thing.
That's just the culture, right? That was the culture.
Wouldn't have been possible to anything else. But he was like in the Marines during World War II, and he kind of stayed in the army slightly after that. In the Marines slightly after that, and he used to travel a fair bit. So he'd been around lots of different countries. So he liked lots of different foods and stuff. So he didn't have that. I'm not eating foreign muck, and he didn't have that thing, because he'd been to these places and he loved it, and he'd you know. So he kind of had a experience of the world and different places in it and different foods and musics and stuff, which. Probably wasn't all that common for
so his mind was broadened.
Yeah, which is, again, it's nothing against people who didn't have that opportunity, because he was just lucky in that regard, but But yeah, that I think that definitely had an effect on who he was as a person and his willingness to kind of embrace more than just, what you immediately see in your environment.
Yeah, that's fascinating. As I say, that is, I mean, it is highly unusual for that particular generation in this country. As you were saying, there was a culture, particularly amongst the working classes, that you lived where you lived, and you often stayed where you lived forever, right?
Yeah, I think that's very normal and probably much more common. But yeah, he was very unusual in that. I mean, it doesn't seem odd to me because it was my experience. But when I think of on a broader sort of stroke of the brush, saying I used to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer with my granddad, that does seem pretty weird.
That is unusual, isn't it? Because it's like, Buffy was very much aimed at like an older teenage, sort of early 20s demographic, wasn't it? So aimed much younger than your granddad, right?
Yeah, but he had, again, it was everything that he loved. He loved good stories. He loved monster stuff, supernatural stuff. He loved action things. It's all there. It's all the stuff that he was, if you can overlook the teenage romancy stuff, which he could, then, and I mean, for that reason, he vastly preferred Angel, the spin-off, because it was the same stuff, but without that melodrama. But he also, he enjoyed Buffy plenty well as well. It wasn't like a burden for him to watch.
Wow, I mean, he would have been having a field day now with the stuff that's available to stream.
He would, he'd have all the streaming channels, and
I mean, stuff like the Mike Flanagan series, all of that.
Hill House, and that would have been one of his favorite things.
Wow, what that's amazing. That really is, and I love the fact that you, as a result of that experience, you have such positive association with material that a lot of people would regard as sort of negative, or inherently negative. I
have a very vivid memory of buying some, when I went into town centre with him once, I got some, do you remember Monster in My Pocket?
Yes, I used to love them.
Amazing set, weren't they? Again, another toy franchises from when we were kids that was all classic monsters.
I must admit, I learned a lot about mythology from them.
Well, funnily enough, this is something else I'm going to have to remember to show you next time you're at my house. I've got the sticker album here. I'm just holding it.
Oh, wow.
Remember that? Every page has got like a little sort of profile of the monsters, and it tells you about the mythology. And that was one of my first experiences of learning about things like Greek monsters and Norse monsters. Yeah. Well, I remember getting some of them when I was in town with him, and I very vividly remember him telling me what he knew about those monsters, because there was like one of the Invisible Man, and there was one Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of my very first memories of Frankenstein monster as a character is him holding the little bright green toy of him, telling that he was stitched together from other body parts, and because he'd seen it in a film, and that's how he knew who this was. And yeah, again, I can't disassociate Frankenstein monster from that memory of my granddad with the monster in my pocket. It's just things like that, yeah.
That is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. His mother-in-law, my grandma's mum, so my great-grandma, when I was young, she was the first person who ever talked to me about Dracula as well. Because she'd heard I was into monsters and stuff. This was on a Christmas Eve, because my mum used to have like a family party thing where all the different and I remember her saying to me, "Oh, I've heard you're into monsters and ghosts and things. Do you know about Dracula?" And I said, like, "No, who's that?" And then she told me about Dracula, and I remember that really vividly as well. Like 90-year-old woman with strongest Yorkshire accent you've ever heard.
Wow.
She worked in a pub quite near to where my mum and dad's house live, and she insisted that it were haunted, and she used to tell me about that as well. Wow. She knew I was interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah, that is superb. It does sound like for you, like the horror material is almost like bound up with your family and childhood.
Very much, yeah. It was never discouraged, George. That's the thing.
Yeah.
There's no one in my family really who's particularly, churchy or anything. My grandma might have kind of on some distant thought liked the idea of Jesus or whatever, but she never went to church. She never preached about it. She would never. And my mum and dad are both atheists, and I'm an atheist, and it's never been a thing. So there was never any satanic panicky stuff going on in my house or anything like that. and also because, well, I've always been sort of the way I am in sort of boring and sensible and logic based. Right? I know now that that's because I'm autistic, but as a child I didn't know that. But my mum and dad knew that that's how I was. So there's never any danger of me watching a film and then copying it.
Yes, right.
So if my mum came in and caught me watching, a Friday the 13th film at 8 years old, she wouldn't really be that bothered because she knew that I knew that it was fake.
Right. I was going to ask, actually. I was going to ask, did you have that experience? Which I think a lot of kids who were like kids in the 80s and early 90s had, where, VHS was so readily available. It was just like every household had a library of VHS. Yeah. A lot of them were horror. A lot of them were sort of action horror. I mean, did you have the experience whereby you could kind of watch what you liked? Regardless of certificate or,
Yeah, pretty much, because particularly I had that friend as a kid who was like the Nelson Muntz friend.
Yeah.
Who's slightly older, maybe just a year or so, but whose parents don't give a shit, unfortunately. Yeah. So, which at the time you think is the coolest thing ever, but as an adult you think, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, which meant that he had access to anything, really. Mm-hmm. So, he was probably smoking at about 12, that kind of thing.
Yes,
But through him, I saw a lot of films like Friday the 13th, Fright Night. I remember watching Alien, the Terminator films, that kind of thing. I remember watching way younger than I would have done otherwise. But again, it wasn't a secret. I would tell my mum, guess what? Oh, I just watched this at his house. And she wouldn't really be that concerned because she know that I'm not likely to now go out and pick a machete up.
Exactly that. I do think that was a very reasonably common experience in children of the UK of that era, wasn't it? Because I had exactly the same thing. We could watch whatever we wanted when we were kids. My mum had a huge VHS library of horror films. And we also used to go, when video rental stores existed, we used to go to the local one and always pick out at least one horror film. Least one.
And the horror section was always great. It was always set out.
Oh, it was so exciting, wasn't it? It was so exciting.
I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a friend of mine named Rob Lane, who's a musician. He's in a lot of really big bands, actually. But him and his friend have opened a sort of experience shop it's near Matlock, and it's basically done out like a 1980s video shop. And you go in and it's got all the different sections, and you can't rent the videos, but they're all there and it's set out just like it, and you can buy merchandise from there and stuff if you're ever nearby.
Must visit that, because it was exciting. Part of what made it exciting was the artwork, of course.
Yeah, they're so great. These videos, I always remember seeing House. The House horror film or horror comedy or whatever. That's one that I always remember. And Critters you would always see. Just those images that stick in your head of the horror film video.
Yeah, The Evil Dead, of course. What was so unusual back then is that the vast majority of VHS boxes didn't have stills from the film on the cover. They had
straight up artwork, wasn't
bespoke artwork, and it was often really weird and interesting, often slightly symbolic rather than literal.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Really evocative,
Never actually appeared in the film.
No, very often, actually, the promise of the covers was much greater than whatever the films actually delivered. But
yes. That was pretty common. But I remember watching, say, horror films. I think it's that funny thing which they actually address on South Park about the 80s and 90s childhoods, which is that if my mum came into the living room at 8 years old and found me watching a film with someone getting his head chopped off with a machete, she wouldn't really be that arsed.
Yeah.
But if she walked in and someone had the tits out, she'd be concerned about that.
Yeah, it's an odd thing, isn't it? And it's
talk about this on South Park, don't they? Where the kids really want to watch this violent film and the parents aren't keen. But then there's another film that comes out or something which is all full of nudity, and they're really focused on that. So they can watch the violent one.
It's a strange. It's one of those things in culture and in our traditions that makes me feel like an alien, where the human body and the natural functions of the human body are taboo for reasons that are historical, and it's because of the influence of Christianity and so on and so forth. It's our traditions that makes it that way. But images of violence and whatnot are not as. You know, it's really bizarre, isn't it? I mean, you said we've spoken about this before, but you see it in toys a hell of a lot. Toys that are marketed at boys, for example. Like in the 80s, we had G.I. Joe, for example, which was called Action Force over here.
Yeah.
Now, those were not like a fantastical franchise as such. They were real. They were supposed to be like real men and women and soldiers. And they were packaged with all of these guns and knives and missile launchers, you know, real weapons that cause real death and carnage. But the male figures had, as all action figures of the era did, had these filed down groins, right? So where they were like mutilated effectively. So the implications one can draw from that is that the male sex is more offensive than the weapons.
Yeah, it's very much a thing that. Yeah, a film will feature the most violent gore you've ever seen in your life and be fine. But, you know, two people have sex at some point, or you see someone sucking someone off, and then that's an instant ban.
Well, Hellraiser's Hellraiser's a great example of this. Have you ever seen Clive Barker's commentary on the original Hellraiser?
No.
There's the sex scene between Frank and Julia. And he's in hysterics when he's talking about it, because he says like, this was the scene they wanted to cut the most. This is the one. This is the one that they had the most problems with. And he goes into like detail about the list of stuff that they got from the BBFC about what they had to cut. And one of them, and he's killing himself as he's reading it out. He's saying like, one of them was we were only allowed to have 3 consecutive buttock thrusts.
Oh God! Well,
but
figured that out.
I know, right?
That's offensive.
I know. Any more than that, and that would be corrupting. That would be obscene.
Wow. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
In a film that has images of, you know, the most extreme bodily mutilation you can possibly imagine. Even the uncut version, you know, even the cut version has that. But this sequence and it's not even like homosexual sex or anything like that at the time would have been considered really, really like out there. It's not even like, you don't see anything.
No.
Almost everything is implied. But that was the sequence.
It's not gratuitous sex, but that's the
sequence that they had a problem with, and and you find that story told again and again and again in horror, and it's a really interesting commentary on our cultures and like the innate, I would call it the innate insanity, the moral insanity of our cultures and traditions.
It is, because it doesn't actually make any sense when you consider what's more harmful. If you are going to be, I mean, people aren't anyway, that's a false thing. But if you are going to be influenced by a film and what's happening on it, so you've just watched people having sex, so you're going to go and have sex. Right. Or you've just watched someone go around with a machete and hack up a load of people, so you're going to do that.
Right.
One of those is clearly fine and the other not. So the censorship seems to make no sense if that is the concern.
It's quite arbitrary, isn't it? It's completely arbitrary. I don't think you could make a coherent argument for why that's the case.
I don't know what I'd love to hear someone attempt it.
Yeah, me too.
Just curiosity. Just like that. Come on, then. Explain to me why a boob is more offensive than someone getting a face ripped open by chains.
Right.
You tell
Especially, me. I mean, like in the 80s, of course, we were still in the midst of like the Mary Whitehouse Brigade. Yeah. I think we were like, I mean, censorship was rife in our culture. But what you were getting as a result of that was a lashback against censorship, of course, which is what always happens. Yes. But can you imagine it happen like these days? I mean, it is still the case, though. It is still the case that like culture in general is more offended by images of just not even sex per se or sexual activity, but the human body than by images of human bodily mutilation.
Well, yeah, I don't think they'd be able to censor now. There's far too many platforms, isn't there? You won't be able to do it. It'd be far too much.
It's even more insane now, isn't it? It's even more insane now. I don't understand why. I mean, it's a conversation I've had with a lot of friends and creators, but I don't understand why. For one thing, I mean, I don't understand why there's a problem with even what would be called gratuitous, like nudity or sex or whatever. I mean, for one thing, it's just anatomy. It's just it's just anatomy. Or every human being has anatomy. I mean, what do these people do when they shower? Do they like go Victorian and not look down or something? Or do they go in like a full onesie or something?
Yeah.
Second of all, not the vast majority of human. This is imagery that we are hardwired to enjoy and to find some frisson in, right?
Yeah.
So why is it so demonized? Why is it via censorship itself, by the fact of censorship and the assumptions that come with that, it is rendered obscene. It is rendered forbidden.
Yeah, it wouldn't be if it wasn't.
Right.
It's funny. It's like very not to do with sexual stuff necessarily, but there's an interesting example of what you're kind of saying there is that when you make a big deal of something, it then makes it a big deal.
Exactly.
Whereas if you don't, it doesn't.
Right.
Very interesting example of this. You know how now, if you did an episode now, because there's all people whinging about what they call woke stuff and all that, right? They don't even know what they're complaining about half the time, George.
Well, no, it's true.
If you did an episode of, say, Doctor Who now, when the new Doctor arrives now, if he gets off with a bloke at some point, you can guarantee there'd be a Daily Mail article. Outrage, right? Oh my God, look what they've done. They're just forcing this on us. Right. Chris Eccleston did that. He got off with John Barrowman in first season. Yeah. No response to that at all.
Nope.
No one said anything about it. There was no outrage. There was no, because no one was there trying to ban it. No one was there trying to make a big deal out of it. It was just a scene in the show. His character, Jack Harkness, is about to go off and face the Daleks on his own. He's going to die, and he knows he is. So he goes up to Rose and gives her a kiss, and he goes to the Doctor and gives her a kiss, and then he goes. And that's it. And no one makes a big deal out of it, but that's the point, because it isn't. Why would it? He's a bisexual character. He's saying goodbye to his two closest friends, so he kisses them both. Yeah. But the fact is, as soon as you push back against something, then people push back against you. Whereas if you just leave it, then everyone kind of takes it as what it's meant to be, rather than some overblown thing to have a problem with, which it isn't.
Yeah, there is something really insidious in our culture at the moment, which is it is this new censoriousness. It's people who use woke as a pejorative, basically.
I've never managed to get a clear answer from what it is.
Exactly. Ask them to define. Ultimately, it's a euphemism for anything I don't like, anything that doesn't accord with my own political agendas. That's what they call woke. That's ultimately it. It's a euphemism for I'm a racist, homophobic, transphobic twat. That's what it is. Yeah. But if the people who use woke could be using the epithets, like the classic epithets, then they would be. That's the truth of the matter, and that's what they're doing. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're pushing. They're trying to obscure their innate bigotry in sort of reasonable terms. But anyone with any sense of like critical faculty can see that. It's obvious, right? It's completely obvious. Their language, and in fact, the implications behind the articles that they print and the screeds that they come out with on Twitter, they are the same as the bigots of like the 1980s and the 1990s, who were so much more overt with it, who would use the epithets, who would, just launch into their racist, transphobic, homophobic tirades. It's exactly the same. The only difference is the language used.
Yeah, they've got to try and hide behind sort of perceived politeness.
That's right. It's the veneer of reason. It's veneer of reason.
I'm always happy to listen to someone who has an opinion that's counter to mine. But I want, or who thinks differently about something than I do, because I'm not that kind of arrogant Guardian liberal who thinks they've got all the answers and everything I say is correct. But if you've got an argument that's massively different to mine, particularly when it's about sort of like the rights and freedoms of human beings, right? You better be able to fucking explain to me with facts and logic why you think that way.
Or at the very least, I mean, even before you even get onto that, I mean, this is like, it's like Marcus Aurelius. Like you take it back to base assumptions. You know, define your terms before you even.
What exactly?
What do you mean? What do you mean? What, when you use these terms, what can you please define? I mean, your emotion is clear, so presumably you must be able to define the terms that are the foundation of those emotions and those responses, right? But they can't.
It's odd, though, the kind of collective woke thing, because what as a term, I mean, because like what it basically comes down to is, like you said, but in terms of media, what it comes down to is when I watch media now, there's gay characters in it, there's trans characters in it, there's women in it who aren't just a damsel in distress or whatever, and I don't like that because but none of this is new.
No, it's not.
These things have been in media. Perhaps, all right. I will accept you that. I will grant you that perhaps there's more prevalence of trans characters now because we're just starting to get better at that. But
because we're actually acknowledging that trans people exist at long last. You know, that's a nice thing.
Other than that's having diverse casts, having women in positions of power, having openly gay characters. None of that's new. That's been around for like 40 years now. So why have they suddenly decided that they hate it?
Isn't it funny when you look back? I mean, a lot of people who use that term, who use the term woke as a pejorative, they like things like the original Star Wars, for example. And I'm like, are you mad? Do you see the same film that we do? The original Star Wars is it's a response to Vietnam. It's a Vietnam film, and it always has been. George Lucas has been very, very open about this. And not only that, you don't even need to know that. You can see it in the text. Yeah. It's obvious.
Well, it's meant to be a deliberate antithesis of what you usually get as the heroine.
Exactly. She's like, our princess is in another castle, but she is the inversion of that, right?
Yeah.
She is so much more competent and coherent than all of the male characters who were sent to ostensibly save her.
Yeah.
She's the inversion. She's the feminist inversion of that.
The rescue because they're fucking idiots. And
because they're idiots. Because they're idiots. Absolutely. The imagery in that film is anti-fascist, right? The Empire. Every inch of the Empire, the imagery that's derived from it is fascist by its nature. There's a reason why Darth Vader looks the way he looks. His entire costume is designed to look like an SS costume, right? An SS uniform, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how many kind of like people will complain about, say, woke stuff, and then the stuff they'll list as their favourite pop cultures are things that you think, well, that's got a main character who's black.
They just don't see it. I mean,
that's a woman, and that guy's brilliantly gay, and you just think, I don't get, how can you not have noticed it?
Sometimes it is
Star Trek's the best one.
Star Trek's a good one.
When people start going on about Star Trek being woke, and you're like, did you ever watch the actual 60s series?
The original, and not only that, but like, did you never read any more widely about the impact that the original series had on 60s culture? It was really traumatic, it was a profound thing. The stuff that Star Trek did with its black characters and its female characters, and also bringing like socialism, a kind of socialist utopia.
Just after the World War II, just in the midst of the Cold War, you've got a show set in the future that shows a starship just at the point where the space race was kind of going on. And we've got a vision of the future where here's a starship where the captain's American. Well, that technically is Canadian, but we've got that. His chief of staff, his like right-hand man, isn't even a human being.
Right.
His chief engineer is Scottish. His chief weapons expert is Japanese. Yeah. His head of communications, as in the head of the entire ship's worth communications team, is a black woman.
Yeah.
And the chief commander of the navigation desk is Russian. Right?
Russian, right? Wow.
How could people underestimate how massively significant this is in the 1960s? To show a vision of the future where none of that shit matters.
No.
We're past all of that, and here we are exploring the stars.
And also, I mean, a vision that's post-capitalist too.
Yeah.
It's like
wow.
That's
and also despite what people think who've never watched it, it isn't some cold, clinical, communist view of the future. People still laugh and joke and fight and have sex and enjoy things. It's not some cold, robotic sort of
and even more so, actually. I mean, the argument that Star Trek makes in its particular utopia is because there's no striving anymore, because there's no fear of like being kicked out of your home or whatever, or not having enough power or not having enough to eat. People have dedicated themselves to artistic pursuits and intellectual pursuits. So every crew member of the Enterprise, from the highest to the, I mean, there's no high or low. That's the thing, right? There's no real high or low. The only reason there's like a captain or anything is because that's their function.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even almost like a hierarchical thing as such. It's just that's what they're best at. Yeah.
Yes.
They are all geniuses, but they would be, by the standards of today, they are all geniuses. You know, they all pursue artistic pursuits. They all play instruments. All, you know, they're all learned in philosophy and history and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. The view people have, again, who've never watched it, of Kirk in particular is way off. They think
it really is
like brutish shagger, and it's like, no, he's not.
It's bizarre, but they've somehow their views of Shatner have merged with Kirk.
That's it. Which is exactly, if you've ever watched Futurama, that's what Zach Brannigan is.
Yes,
Zach Brannigan is basically Captain Kirk's job, but Will Shatner's personality. That's basically who Zach Brannigan is, but that isn't who Kirk actually is.
Right.
Kirk is a very artistic, very educated, very reasoned, very philosophical person, and he gets his head turned quite easily by women, but he's human.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
But,
but it's fascinating, isn't it? Because like the Star Trek fan community is definitely one of the more fractious and contentious and conservative. There is this tendency, and obviously it's not universal, but like collectively there is definitely this tendency for them to be very reactionary. Anything new, any new series, any new interpretation of the material tends to be immediately condemned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like all the different series.
No, well, there's so many.
I'm forced to. But the reasons people give for not liking them is what confuses me. Like, I can just flat out say, I don't particularly like Deep Space Nine, because I don't. Yeah. I just don't particularly enjoy it. It just don't grab me. But when people say, "Oh, I don't like that new one because it's too woke," I don't get that at all. I don't know what that means.
For me, I mean, I'm not even that big a fan of Star Trek. It's not something that interests me as such. But like having watched the original series and like the Next Generation, I'm like, are we living? Am I having like a Mandela effect thing here? Are we watching like two completely different shows? Because I'm telling you now, you have misunderstood the source material. It is antithetical to the ideologies and the perspectives that you're evincing here. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much. It kind of defeats the whole point of what this future is supposed to be about.
I mean, there is a meme, isn't there, that a lot of people like who were kids, like when we were kids, who grew up with this stuff, they've ended up becoming the villains in their favorite franchises. You know,
like, you don't realize that you're now him. You know,
yeah, and not understanding, right? Not understanding the fact that that's who they've become.
Did you hear? I mean, we'll get off Star Trek because I know it's not what we're here for, but did you hear that Nichelle Nichols was contacted by Martin Luther King?
No.
In the 60s.
Wow.
See, Nichelle Nichols, who was Lieutenant Uhura, she was primarily a theatre actress on Broadway. She did musicals and stuff. That was her thing, but she was asked to do be in this new show, and she gave it a go, and she signed on for one series.
Yeah.
And she enjoyed it, but that was it. She was done with it after that. But she was at a party, and she was there, and someone said, "Would you mind having a conversation? There's a fan of yours would like to meet you. Would you be willing to come and say hello?" And she said, "Yeah, fine." And it was Martin Luther King.
Oh my God!
And she said she was talking to him, and he was a huge Star Trek fan. And she said, "Oh, I'm actually done with that." And he said, "Please don't." Do you have
wow.
any idea how important it is
Yeah.
for little black girls to be watching that program and seeing you
Yeah.
on the head, the head department of the Enterprise, right there on the bridge, alongside men and white men in particular, to watch a black woman on screen and she's got that position of authority and no one even mentions the fact that she's black.
It's not a thing, right? In this culture, it's not a thing to see that so as a vision. Yeah.
Yeah. And she agreed to stay on and carry on because of that.
That's
and
amazing.
Interestingly, in Whoopi Goldberg's autobiography, she specifically cites watching Star Trek and seeing Nichelle Nichols and shouting to her mom and saying, "Mom, there's a black woman on telly and she's not a maid."
Right.
She vividly remembers that.
And of course, she ended up on Star Trek.
She ends up
obviously.
But yeah, that just shows you that. I mean, that's one person, but that's the importance.
Yeah.
Of, what that show was doing.
No, it's absolutely true. It is. It is absolutely true. You're seeing it in like genre fiction across the board these days. You are seeing just greater representation. You're seeing more voices, and it is important. I mean, like I still remember the first time I read short like stories and novels in horror, where it went on in my head. Oh, we can write about being gay in this genre. That was never like. Because like it was so sort of dominated by sort of heteronormative dynamics and assumptions up until that point, you just assume that's what goes, right? That's the way it works. But when you come across those writers that don't do that and that show you that it can be this way or that way, it is important, right? It turns the light on. It turns the light on in your mind and you're like, oh, it can be done.
Because it kind of makes you realise that you're sort of welcome in that space, if you like, both as a character within it. Oh, look, there's people just like me in this story, or also just as someone who can write it themselves. It doesn't feel like it's shut off to you.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it doesn't feel like, you're not going to be able to sort of explore your own experiences in that regard. You're always going to have to write characters who are this dynamic.
Exactly that. Yeah, that's very and I think that's really important. And that's something I suppose which will have been very different for my experience growing up with horror than yours, is because obviously being sort of cisgendered and heterosexual, I've never really had any lack of representation.
Like representation in the genre. No, I suppose
it does still bother me. I must admit, I don't think, not just in horror, but in anything, I don't think we're quite there with regard to autistic characters.
No, not yet.
It's still like to see an autistic character who isn't insanely brilliant,
like a savant,
like basically needing help to wipe the arse when they I'd like someone that just seems like a normal human
we are still struggling definitely with representations of autism, and the big problem is, of course, it's exactly the same thing that we had in, like, say, the late 90s with regards to gay representation, which is it's not often gay creators who are doing it in the same way. It's not often autistic creators who are writing or performing these characters, so it doesn't really work. It doesn't always work.
No, I think it'd be nice to see that, particularly in horror, but I'd like to have a character who's autistic where their autism isn't a thing. That's not an important part of their, do you know what I mean? So, like, a really good example of this with well, you may disagree that it's a good example, but what I think is a good example with regard to LGBTQ representation is the recent Knives Out movies. So you've got this character, Benoit Blanc, and then just partway through the second film, you realise that he's married to a man. He's got a husband. And you're like, oh, okay, so he's gay. And that's it. It's in no way relevant to the events of the film. No. It's just, so he's a gay character.
Although, I will say, I mean, like, Daniel Craig does a really good job of making that character feel gay.
Oh, yeah.
He really does.
To him. But he's not
like,
he's not,
no.
Yeah.
It's a more sincere gay energy, bizarrely. You could infer that the character is gay without having seen his husband or his partner.
I have heard a suggestion for a film, another one, where Hugh Grant's in it more as his husband, and where he's trying to not solve cases because they're on holiday together or something.
But something crops up,
yeah, that would be good.
I'm well up for that. I mean, I'm kind of having just seen and loved both of those films very recently. I'm up for Benoit Blanc does anything, I
like the Muppet suggestion.
I think that's brilliant. I think he'd fit in very well. He's got a sort of
Michael Caine doesn't just play it straight.
Yes.
Daniel Craig would need to act as if the Muppets were just live action actors.
Just real people, yeah. Absolutely. But no, that's Benoit Blanc is a great example of representation. It is the case that I do enjoy fiction that does explore that does explore LGBTQ themes. There's some brilliant stuff out there.
Yes, queerness as the theme is obviously very important too, but not every character who's gay has to have their gayness as their defining quality.
No, that's exactly it.
That's exactly what I mean about autistic characters. I'd like to have an autistic character who, when you're filling in a character sheet, like writing about who they are, it doesn't just have the word autistic in the middle, and that's it.
It is a problem, isn't it, for anyone who operates within any kind of demographic, really, that is not mainstream, that is not just sort of, neurotypical white cisgender. The problem is that we tend to become pigeonholed. Culture has this weird defense mechanism where when you've got any kind of demographic or cultural movement that it considers initially to be corrosive or antithetical to its assumptions, what it tends to do is first it demonizes and tries to suppress, and that never works. So over a period of years, that stops. And then what happens is it makes space for them, but it makes space in this very narrow, defined and prescriptive way. Yeah. So these are your parameters. This is where you are going to operate. You see it like the queer characters who occur in soaps.
Yes, very.
They are
very. Yeah.
They're the best examples I can think of, because they are. There's always one of two stereotypes. There's always it's either the safe gay character, which is the one that people can recognize just by looking at them, who are sort of stereotypically flaming, kind of effeminate, those characters, or they are the self-loathing, in denial, gonna sort of destroy all the relationships around him character when he eventually comes out and then buggers off out of the show. Yeah. That character. There doesn't ever tend to be any in between in those, where you like you said, where they are incidentally gay or trans or whatever,
Yeah. And also where they might not be the best, nicest, most genius, talented character in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go a bit overboard with that in a lot of things.
Well, actually, that's a thing. Just like the representations of autistic characters, where there's almost this weird apology that culture makes.
Yes, that's a very good way of describing it. It's like an apology, isn't it?
It is, but it's like a false apology, isn't it? It's like it's trying to absolve its audience for considering the complexities of the situation. So, this character's autistic, but don't worry, they're a genius, so you don't have to worry about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's so bizarre, isn't it? It's so bizarre.
It's not to do with autism, but it's physical disability. Have you ever watched Phoenix Nights, the comedy show from the other
No. I know of it, but I've never sat and watched it.
It's brilliant. It holds up really well. It's about a working men's club, right? And the guy who owns it, it's written and directed by Peter Kay, and he plays the main character. He's a guy called Brian Potter who's in a wheelchair, right? He is an absolute arsehole. Nothing to do with him being in a wheelchair.
No, he's just an arsehole.
He's just an arsehole. He uses his disability to get away with being an arsehole.
Brilliant.
So he'll find out there'll be something like he's doing a charity karaoke concert, but actually he's pocketing all the money, right?
Of course.
And when someone points it out, he'll be, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm in a wheelchair. And it's nothing to do with it, Brian. Nothing to do with it.
That's brilliant.
But it's very, very cleverly written, because the first few episodes you're kind of led to believe, with how often he trots that out, that maybe he's really bitter about it and everything.
Yeah.
So you think it doesn't excuse it, but all right. But then you see flashbacks to before he was in a wheelchair, and he was exactly the same.
Yeah. So it's not made much of a difference to who he is.
It's just giving him a get out of jail free card now.
Great.
But that is such a good representation of a disabled character, that he's a fully rounded and unpleasant character, but he happens to be disabled. Whereas usually, particularly around that time when you'd have a physically disabled character, they'd be the sweetest, kindest, most intelligent, talented. But that's not real, is it?
It's dehumanizing, isn't it? It's taking away the complexity of and the variety.
Every type of straight character you've ever seen in a show, whether it and straight male characters, I should say, whether it's he's nice or he is a good guy, but he's a bit of a dick, or he's a bad guy, but he's actually quite nice, or every variation in between. Those exist for women, for black people, for gay people, for trans people, for disabled people. There is as much variety within that. Just because they're gay doesn't mean they have to be the camp supervillain. It doesn't.
No, this is
so, there can be all that nuance that you can have with straight white characters.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that we're actually kind of struggling within the genre at the moment. I mean, this is what the Book of Queer Saints that was published last year, it's what it was a reaction to. This notion that queer characters have to be pure as the driven snow, or they have to be this, or they have to be that, or you can't explore the innate complexities and often the issues that exist within our own identities and cultures, which do exist, as they do in any culture, that you're not allowed to explore those through your fiction because somehow you are indulging in negative representation. That was a reaction to that very notion. And it's something that is happening within the genre, this genre and others more widely at the moment. There is this sort of reaction where queer creators are going, no, we're going to explore what we like, and if that means going into the dirt and the darkness and the despair and the difficulties of these identities and experiences, of our identities and experiences, then that's what we're going to do. I think, like with representations of autism, and to be honest, sort of like learning difficulties, social difficulties, across the board, it's still in the very early stages at the moment. It's like LGBTQ representation was at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s.
Sort of like your Will and Grace period.
Oh God, yeah, Jesus.
That's very. I'm sure we spoke about this before, but with regard to what you were just saying about the Book of Queer Saints and what that's a response to, I remember listening to a podcast during lockdown with James Dreyfus, the British actor. He talking about. He was in a sitcom called Gimme Gimme Gimme.
I remember Gimme Gimme Gimme. Yeah,
very raucous, very queer British sitcom, and he played a character who was a very unusual to see working class gay man.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? That's another thing. The working classness. The class is often stripped from queer characters.
Absolutely. Now,
isn't that weird? Isn't that strange?
Yeah. So he was very sort of. Let's say rough around the edges. He
was down and out as well, wasn't he? Like he was an actor, wasn't he? Ostensibly, he was an actor.
Yes.
But didn't get hired for anything ever.
No, because he was no good.
He was crap, wasn't he? He was crap.
He was very heavy drinking, drug taking, slept around a lot. He was rude. He was all of these things. And at that time, he talks about this on this podcast. I listened to him. He was written about in, I can't remember if it was Attitude or Stonewall or something. He was written about in a magazine talking about how bad it was that he was playing that character.
Oh, interesting.
Because they were saying exactly what you just said about how it's a bad representation and how queer people should be shown in a positive light, like in Will and Grace.
Right.
And he was like, no, but these kind of gay people exist as well.
Right. This is the fullness of our experience, and by not being allowed to explore that or to write about that, then we are being denied our humanity just as much as anyone on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Patronizing. It's like it's like treating you like children. That you can't have
in its own peculiar
gay character.
Right. In its own subtle way, it's as homophobic as someone who would say, "Yo, you just can't have gay characters because they're vile or they're evil." Yeah. In its own subtle way, it is, because it's dehumanizing. Right. It's saying that gay people are not human, that we don't have these varieties and complexities of experience and personality and whatnot. and it's something that is not helpful. It's not helpful to any demographic. That's what fiction and art is for, right? It's for exploring, and horror in particular, it's for exploring these things, these difficulties, these problematics, you know?
Well, I think horror's great for that because it's a good way of kind of introducing you to like characters who the characters themselves might not be the focus of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So it kind of like, for people who might be a bit naturally bigoted or whatever, it's a way of kind of slipping under the door. You're gonna give a shit about a gay black couple here,
right?
Or, you know what I mean?
Because I know exactly what you mean. There you can sort of infiltrate a little bit, can't you?
Yeah, I think it's quite a good tool for that horror. I think you can use it for that. Like I remember speaking about this with do you know Mark Allen Gunnels? I think
yeah, very familiar with Mark.
I wrote a story which I remember him messaging me about. One of my first contacts I ever had with him, actually. He's a good friend now. Which is I wrote a story about it's a gay couple who moved to this small village, and one of them is dying, and it's like a folk horror story, and there's kind of ways in which you can circumvent this death. The fact that they're gay is incidental. They just happen to be a gay couple. That's just who they were when they popped into my head.
Yeah.
So that's who they were. You know, I treat that no differently than whatever popped into my head, because why would I? You know.
Yeah, right.
I remember getting a review about that story, saying, I spoke to Mark about this, saying, don't know why the writer had to make them gay. And I just remember thinking, what does it matter? Why would you
hyper fixate on that? Right.
You know, it's so bizarre to me. As a straight person who's always been kind of othered myself, I've never been a part of. When you describe a straight man, that's never been me. I've never been, even as a straight man myself, I've never been what you would think of as stereotypical straight man. I've always been othered by my own kind, if you like, through the fact that I'm autistic, which is why I think so many of, I mean, you've met a lot of them now. So many of my friends are LGBTQ or
it's very sort of like pride around your place, isn't it? You know, when they gather, it's great.
But they're all someone who would be othered in one way from society.
Almost everyone, right?
You know what? Sorry,
almost everyone.
Because that's where I've always been. You know, why would I want to associate with people who have me? You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, but because of that, I've never understood the people's problems with these things.
No.
I've never understood, even in the 90s when it was like almost, you know, you people had used gay as an insult.
I mean, like on the schoolyard, it was the worst thing you could be called, right? You know?
I've never understood. Again, it's that like pure autistic logic of, he fancies boys instead of girls. And what does it matter? Why am I supposed to care? It's so confusing to me, and I find it really irritating when you get stuff like that comment in that review that I just mentioned.
Yeah, it kind of
you still have people like this.
Yeah, it betrays the biases, doesn't it? The fact that they are hyper fixating.
I thought we got past it. That's my point. When you see this, I'm like, we've still.
It's disappointing, isn't it? It's disappointing that we haven't got past this nonsense yet. I mean, but then, you know, with the forces in culture that are operating now that we were talking about earlier, the sort of, you know, the anti-woke people, it's like, those forces do still exist, and sadly that they do have quite a lot of platforms and sway, it seems, and they are dangerous. You know, I mean, it's like there's a reason why, you know, since 2016, homophobic assaults are up like 500% in this country. You know,
dismay at anything like that, because I honestly thought we were going the right way with
I had that presentiment too. I really felt that for a time. And to the realization that maybe not is kind of, and don't get me wrong, it's not entirely despairing. There's a generational gap, for example. Like, you know, you look at the kids who are at school today, and, you know, they don't understand this wave of like transphobia in the UK at all, because they've got friends and family members who are gay, who are bi, who are lesbian,
when the younger people have got their head on straight.
Yep.
That's what you want, because the older generation is going to die off at some point.
Yeah. But that's what you're seeing now, actually. I mean, I would posit anyway, this is what you're seeing. The current extremism that you're seeing is the dying throes. It's the desperate thrashings of entire institutions and traditions that are trying to grapple onto relevance, you know?
That's what you want to happen, yeah. If that's what it is, you think, all right, well...
I mean, it's bloody dangerous, because, like, in the immediate, it's dangerous to all of us, you know? But I do think that's the case. Like when I mean, it sounds awful, but when our parents' generation are fine, like when they do die off, really, it's gone, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of gone, right? Like,
who's going to be voting Tory? That's
exactly. Who's going to be voting Tory? Who's going to be watching GB News? Who's going to be reading the Daily Mail? Who's going to be reading the Sun? We're not.
No.
We're definitely not. The generations below us are definitely not.
It just makes you think that it might be like a last gasp, doesn't it?
I think it is a last gasp, but I do. It is. I mean, it's frightening. It is because, like, in the immediate, there's a lot of damage that's been caused. You know,
just to sort of bring that back round to
of course,
horror, but it is still relevant to what you're saying. Do you think the satanic panic thing, which I know that was more of a thing in America than here, but we did still get it here?
Yes,
think that was almost like a last gasp of the previous generation?
I think it
with regard to Christianity, because our parents' generation, even if not our parents themselves, our parents' generation is like you said, kind of the last gasp of this sort of old school conservatism.
Yep.
But I would say they're not particularly religious.
No, it's a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the generation above them, which would have been Mary Whitehouse, they were. So do you think that sudden panic about shit in the late 80s and early 90s, do you think that was their sort of last gasp? Or?
I think it probably was, to be honest. And I imagine if you look at this in historical terms, you will probably see this happening again and again and again.
Yeah.
These escalating moral panics, usually over something quite incidental. Yes. So in the US, it was like, as you say, it was this. I mean, in the US, it was entirely made up, right? It was actually getting.
There was no grounding to it.
There was literally nothing. It was spun from whole cloth. This notion that there was like Satanists at large in culture. It's like and Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, the most harmless thing anybody could be doing. The thing that if you had any scope about it, that you'd want your kid to be doing, right? Because it's safe, it's imaginative, it's got, like, you know, it allows them to exercise their imagination. It's social, so it's communicative. But that became a focal point for this mass hysteria. It's funny, I was actually, before we came on, I was watching one of the old YouTube reviewers, Spoonie, Noah Antweiler, and he talks about this quite a lot because he used to be a D&D player back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And he's from Arizona, which was like ground zero for the Satanic Panic. And he was talking about
where was this? I wondered where the heart of it was.
Kind of like ground zero. And he was talking about actually being dragged into the principal's office because he had a D&D club and being asked about like all these searching questions about like, oh, so what does it consist of? Because of course back then people were totally ignorant, like adults in particular were totally ignorant about this stuff. And it's like, wow, really? The most harmless thing imaginable.
Of all the things that they could pick on. This is a danger.
This is what you're picking on. This is what. But then again, that tends to happen with these movements. They do go for harmless things because harmless things very often can't defend themselves. It's what you're seeing with like the trans panic in this culture right now. Yeah. It's the reason they're going for trans people is the reason they went for gay people in the 80s and the 90s. It's because they, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, we were kind of an underrepresented demographic, right? Outside of our own communities, we didn't have much power or sway.
No.
Now, the trans culture, they are an even smaller demographic and even more inchoate, you know? There are even less trans people than there are gay people. So it's an entirely harmless demographic that cannot put up the defense, you know? There's a bullying element to it. There is a bullying element to it, you know?
Yeah, but it's like, I think it's funny that when these voices know that people aren't really going to be listening for much longer, they suddenly get louder.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite telling, isn't it?
It really is.
Whilst it's dangerous while it's happening, there's a spark of hope there in that these guys are going to be gone soon.
They're going to be done. I mean, it's why you're seeing. I would say you're kind of seeing it in terms of the phenomena that they're creating. So you're getting like these little crystallized bastions of right-wing propaganda like GB News and whatnot, and it's the last gasp. It's the only little area, the only little safe space where they're not going to be criticized, where they can just talk to their demographics and nobody's going to say that's bullshit, you're talking absolute fucking rot, you know. But even that is dying on its arse, right?
Yeah, because most people think it's an absolute joke.
It's a joke, right? GBBs, right? They call it GBBs, don't they? Because like CBeebies has more worth than this apparent news network. I think with the shift between generations, which I think is going to be like abyssal. It's abyssal. I think it's huge, this one. I don't think we've seen such a big gap between generations since like the parents of the 1950s and the children of the 1960s, you know?
Yes.
I think it's huge. I really do.
There's a huge cultural chasm there between what they're about and what.
And I think it's insurmountable. I really do, because like the kids now, they're growing up with their trans, non-binary queer friends and brothers and sisters and whatnot, and they're like, "What is the fucking deal?
Yeah,
who cares? Nobody gives a shit, right?"
Well, things often aren't. I think when you take out like religion or kind of like political attitudes that people want you to have because they have them and all that kind of thing. When you get right down to it, most people just want to get on with their life. And
that's it. Time. That's exactly it.
And when you realise that that's the same with everyone.
Yep.
And you start ignoring these conservative voices, these religious voices, and you realise that, oh, that Muslim guy who lives down the street is just same as me, except
it's just exactly the same.
He plays his Xbox and he watches same sort of films as I do, and he goes to work in the morning. And when people start realising, oh, that gay couple down the street's no different than me and my wife, and once you get into that, it shatters all this control that like churches and stuff try and have, and I think that's what they're afraid of, really.
That's exactly it. It makes people realise that actually I've got more in common with this person of this demographic than I'll ever have with someone like, say, Nigel Farage, or whatever. Or these people who want us to be divided, who want us to be afraid of one another, because that's how they maintain relevance, right? Yeah, I think that's the truth. And people just are realizing more and more and more and more, I think. It's just that in the interim, those voices are becoming more extreme, and those who listen to them are becoming more extreme. I mean, I guarantee it's only a matter of time. We've already had it in the US. It's only a matter of time before there is a massive anti-queer event in this country where there is some sort of like murder or bombing or something. It's only a matter of time.
But do you not think that will kind of crystallize more people against them?
Let's hope so.
Because again, most people, even if you're sort of quietly sitting there thinking, I don't really like all this gay stuff, like that. But then when you hear there's been a bombing and 50 people have been killed, you're gonna surely even those people are gonna be sort of more like, well, that's not okay.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Do you know what I mean? There's not going to be many people, like casual conservatives, shall we say, who are going to hear that and think, "Oh, yeah, that's good." You've already. I think you're going to turn more people against you when you. Start.
I mean, I'd rather it didn't happen, but it's only a matter of time. I think with the rhetoric that's flying around at the moment, with the escalating anti-trans bigotry that's flying around at the moment. I think it's only a matter of time. I'm surprised it hasn't happened, quite frankly.
Well, it hasn't, but I don't know why so many people have got to be in the bonnet.
No. Well, it's entirely contrived, isn't it? It's entirely contrived. It's like we were saying, it's one of the last gasps of the right in this country. They haven't got anything else. That's the way. If you look at them historically, that's all they've ever had. All they've ever had is rhetoric and scapegoating, because there's no solid ideas. There's never been any like sincere or solid ideas, and this is the last that they have.
That's a massive study that I remember seeing on Twitter last year, which said that something like the vast majority of left-wing voters base their opinions on things, facts, and
yeah, right.
Not the case for the vast majority of right-wing voters.
Right.
Like, who's that a surprise to? Because
right.
I don't think that was a particular shock to me.
No, there was it? I think it was Giles Corran. No, it wasn't Giles Corran. Giles Corran is a twat. It was I can't remember his name, but there's some like journalist or commentator. It may have been Ian Hislop actually. He went around a traditionally conservative voting borough, and
Giles Brandreth.
Yeah. That's right. And he was reading out like policies that were actually in the Labour manifesto. So Jeremy Corbyn's Labour manifesto in 2019, but he didn't tell. Yeah, because he was reading these out and they were like, yeah, that's obviously a good idea. Well, yes, that's exactly what the country needs. And then he told them that, well, actually, these are Jeremy Corbyn's policies, and immediately backstepped. Immediately sort of like, oh, no, actually, no, But before they knew that it was Jeremy Corbyn's policies, then they were all for them. They were all for them. It's a fabulous example of the influence of media, right?
Yeah, which is ironic when you think that. So what these are people who just follow something blindly without really knowing why they're following it. They've just kind of been told to. That's your opinion. You should have that.
Yeah.
And yet then they're the ones who worry about things like satanic influence.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Don't you think that's more like you than
people? Well, I mean, psychologically that makes sense because projection is really powerful, right?
Oh yeah.
Projection is really powerful. Very often, what we proclaim to loathe in other people, we loathe in ourselves. That's almost like a universal psychological truth. So. It doesn't surprise me that the people who are the most readily and easily influenced by media are the ones who then project that and proclaim that, oh, you've just been brainwashed, or you've just been like, you've listened to this or that propaganda or whatever. When in fact, I mean, one of my favorite experiments when I encounter someone who doesn't like Corbyn is like, well, why?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of what, when they say things like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand not liking him on like, if you don't like him, you don't like him, but in political terms, when they say things like, oh, well, things would have been worse if Corbyn got in, well, how?
Yeah, what specifically, what and how?
How? Because at the moment, the only way things could have been worse is if he got on stage somewhere with like several nuclear bombs strapped to him and activated them,
Yeah. I don't know what it is they think he would have had to. Yeah.
What would he have had to have done to make things worse?
With regard to, I keep going back to Satanic Panic because
please do.
I find really fascinating.
Me too.
Do you remember that being spoken about here at all?
No, I mean,
I remember there being some films like the Video Nasties thing.
Yes,
that you just couldn't get hold of that were kind of spoken about on the playground.
We had our own version of the Satanic Panic here. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as it was in the US, but we did have this like conservative lurch, this reaction to like media, which occurred like in the mid 1970s through the 1980s and into the early 90s, and it was the Mary Whitehouse Brigade. Right, it was this incredible conservative movement that were reacting to the availability of new media, effectively, and the existence of new media, led by this woman, Mary Whitehouse, who was nobody. She was literally nobody. She just came out of nowhere, but who was incredibly conservative, incredibly bigoted, hated homosexuals, hated like what she considered to be the license of modern culture, and thought that the only thing that should be on television were pro-Christian, like nationalistic. What's really interesting about her movement? They were pro-war.
Yeah.
I mean, how bizarre is that? They hated images of violence on television, but they were
that don't really add up, does it?
They were pro-war. So actual violence they were okay with as long as it wasn't being shown, as long as it wasn't being reported on. I mean,
yeah, that's very telling, though.
How bizarre, right? How utterly bizarre. But they were powerful. I mean, they were really powerful. I mean, this woman had.
You could finally get Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas Chainsaw, well, late on. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it was like 1999. That was eventually.
It really was. It's like it seems bizarrely late, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, like, that was one of the few films I never saw when I was a kid that we never had on VHS. And so it did have a bit of a patina, you know, it was a bit of a, like, mythic almost. But yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the many films that came under that particular. There's lots, actually. I mean, The Evil Dead did eventually, didn't it?
I'm thinking when I was young, I remember, I think Texas Chainsaw was the one I would hear about quite often. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. That will be the one that was spoken about the most in my
definitely
sort of banned horror experiences. You know, to the point where you wonder if it even exists.
Exactly. Is it real?
No internet. So it's not like you could go on internet and Google it and say, "Oh yeah, look, there it is." Look, it was just something you'd spoken about because that's the thing when you talk about like our early influences of horror is that for our generation, pre-internet.
Yeah,
it's so vastly different from what like people growing up now.
Another world.
And that like there'd be some things you just flat out never hear of.
Right. It was another world. You were so much more closed off then.
Exactly. Yeah, there'd be some films that would come and go, and unless you happen to know someone who'd watched it and they spoke about it in your presence or something, or you saw an advert for it, you'd never know it existed.
You literally would not know it existed. So when we say pre-internet, we're talking like no internet at all, hardly any computers. You know, I mean, like there were consoles, but computers were really rare back then.
It was like if you had a friend at school who were proper like middle class, they might have one, but otherwise
they might,
But it'd be some Apple Mac thing that you could do naff all on.
Exactly. I mean, we did have an Amiga, but the only reason we had an Amiga is because my granddad won some money on the pools and got us one. You know, that's the only way we could.
So it's like an incident. It's not at the norm. Yeah.
Oh God, no! There's no way we could have afforded an Amiga.
That kind of mythology around films doesn't happen now.
Not really.
Where like they'd be speak of it on a playground, but like, you know, all you'd have to do now is open up your phone and have a look for it.
Just look, right? You could just look. Yeah. So yes, that's absolutely true. You heard of so much through rumor.
Yes.
Right, and that lasted like well into like the PlayStation 1 era, right? You know, so into the mid-90s, because I remember video games had that thing. You know, they had this like playground mythology,
extra cheat codes or secret levels.
Yeah. I mean, the classic one is obviously the Tomb Raider. You know, there was always this myth that there was like a nude code for it's like.
Oh yeah, some sort of cheat code you could enter and she'd be topless or something. Yeah,
it's like. And you know, and also, so what? I mean, it'd be like polygons. It'd be so bad.
Not exactly got to be particularly appealing, was it? With triangle boobs, but
no, it wouldn't be exactly appealing, would it? To be honest. But I remember like hearing about things like Resident Evil for the first time, for example. People talking about it at school. Silent Hill, you know, Silent Hill when that hit people were like legit traumatized.
Yeah, did that try and get banned at one point?
I'm fairly certain there were movements.
Or it underwent some sort of censorship because don't you like kill like children looking?
Yes, actually, both the original Resident Evil and the original Silent Hill were censored here.
And so it was about the time of Columbine, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. So that kind of doesn't surprise me. In fact, Silent Hill, the censorship that occurs in Silent Hill may have been a direct response to that, because there is a sequence in a school where you are in the US version, I think, and in the Japanese version, you are killing these they're like sort of Silent Hill twisted like children.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
But in the UK version, they took them out. They were like replaced by these shadow things that weren't quite as specific, you know.
Yeah.
In Resident Evil, Resident Evil, they cut out almost all of the blood, almost all of the blood from the intro sequence, you know, from the FMV sequence. But they put it back in because they then released the director's cut, so it worked out fine because they got to sell the game twice, you know.
Yeah, that's double your sales, but that's an odd censorship in it, taking blood out. But yeah, I definitely remember hearing that about Silent Hill.
Yeah, Silent Hill was censored. I mean, it was shortly after that really censorship became a nonsense. You know, it was just like it almost died. It almost like completely died a death shortly after that, and suddenly you could get away with all sorts, particularly within video games. But it was a thing. It was really powerful here. I mean, and it's still. Sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say, we kind of, when you think about it, then we sort of saw horror moving into a new genre, gaming, kind of in real time, didn't we? Because like horror films and horror books already existed when we were a kid, but games was a new thing.
Oh, it was. I mean, they did exist, but they were really rare. Like, and they were very hard to get a hold of, and they only ever occurred on like the computers. So, like, there was just, funnily enough, just up the road from me, there was a local video game studio that produced games for the Amiga called Horrorsoft, and they did produce horror games for the Amiga, and they were really gory and they were really extreme, and they had like, you know, warnings all over them. But because they were on the Amiga, which hardly any, you know, it wasn't easy to own an Amiga.
No.
Nobody batted an eye. No, the tabloids didn't get a hold of it, so they didn't bother. They didn't care. It wasn't until like horror started to occur on the consoles that it became a thing.
Yeah, because it's more mainstream and everyone's got one, I suppose.
Exactly that. And of course, the consoles were always aimed at younger children anyway. Like the computers were always more sort of young adult. You know, it was slightly older gamers that were playing on the computers because, of course, they could do adult things. They could word process and you could use Paint and all of that garbage. But the consoles back then were definitely marketed as toys, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because the video game crash had kind of made that necessary because video games weren't a popular thing anymore.
No.
So they called them like entertainment system.
Entertainment system. Yes, of course.
And of course. Did Splatterhouse get some sort of censorship?
Splatterhouse was censored here. They made the blood green in Splatterhouse. You know, it became slime. Yeah. The big one that caused a huge ruckus here. Like the tabloids got a hold of it. It was debated. It was discussed in Parliament, for fuck's sake. Was that Mega CD game, Night Trap? Night Trap.
No, not that. Is it Night Trap?
Night Trap, yeah.
Yeah. That is on the new. You know, you get the mini consoles with all the games.
Oh yeah.
The Mega Drive 2, and it's on that.
Is it on it? It's shite. I mean, it's shite. It is, I mean, it's like. Yeah. The only reason it got any traction is because of the controversy surrounding it. It's interesting as an historical curio, you know? Yes. But that and Mortal Kombat together, they were the reason for the creation of the ESPA, the Video Game Classification Board in this country.
Well, I mean, I'd rather have that on things. It's like when people talk about like content warnings and stuff. I'd rather you just put something on it and let me have it rather than take it out. Because then I'm making the decision, aren't I?
Definitely.
If you tell me in front of this film, just so you know, this film's got A, B, and C in it. So if you don't like that kind of thing, don't watch it. Yeah,
fine. Absolutely fine.
I don't care about that, but don't take it out, because why do you get to decide for me?
I mean, that is one of the big benefits of things like content warnings, of course. It actually means it's not as you know, people will proclaim, oh, it's a kind of censor. No, it's not. It's actually the opposite.
It's removing the need for censorship.
Exactly.
It's allowing you to make the decision instead of some crusty old men in suits deciding what I can watch. That's
exactly that. That's absolutely true, and it's less arbitrary as well, isn't it? I mean, you can select based on what you know will work for you and what will not. I mean, that's fine by me. I think it's a good thing. I mean, some of the really clever like writers out there, like Matt Shaw, he's used it like brilliantly as a marketing tool, right?
Yeah.
It's clever.
You know, some people will come for that, basically.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I mean, it works on me. It works on me. If I see, if I see something, the content warning that says, graphic violence, sex, nudity. Oh, brilliant, great. Sounds like a good evening.
Yeah, it's funny because I do think though that is kind of, it's almost like self-censorship. That's a really a good system.
Yeah,
but it does kind of take away from the mythology of films that they had when we were a kid, where you know that, oh, this film's been banned. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
And I think that you're not really going to get that now.
No, because it's one of the. I mean, again, it's one of the ironies of censorship, isn't it? That it does. Yeah. Well, I mean, we know that now. When you look back, and there are entire documentaries and studies about this. You know, like the little grimy video stores that would have showings in their back rooms or in their cellars of banned media.
Most of video nasties, most of the video nasties as films were dog shit.
Yeah.
But the only reason they got famous is because they were banned.
It's totally true. I mean, like, one of the big ones was like Cannibal Ferox, obviously, you know? I fucking hate that film. I think it's crap. I think it is, like, just dirty and filthy and shit.
The only reason they got any traction is because they had this sort of furore around them, which led people to them. But
it's true.
Them released normally, about 20 people would have watched them. Word of mouth would have said that they're garbage, and that would have been that.
That would have been it. You're absolutely right. But because of the mythology around them, people just wanted to see them, and that's human nature, right? That's human nature. I mean, that's the irony of these movements that want to censor shit. You know, they don't understand that by telling people no will make people want to go. It will actively make people go and seek them out.
Yes, it does. It's human nature. That it's really funny how that works, and they never seem to learn from it.
Nope.
But with regard to, like, I know we've spoke about watching stuff younger than you should, and it not really. Do you have? Because I've got a few of these. Do you have any films that you remember being of particular kind of significance to you, as in like your identity?
Like when I was a kid, you know.
Right up to, I would say, teenage years.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
It's a case of, I've watched this younger than I should, but as in, like, it did something to you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like, in terms of horror, there's so many. There are so many. Hellraiser had real power when I was a kid for me. Like, you know, as I said, we had this massive VHS library. So by the time I was like 8, really, we'd seen a lot of shit. We'd seen a lot of stuff. Hellraiser, and the first sequel, Hellbound, for some reason, those two films I was always like sort of trepidatious about. I would always approach them with caution because they always not scared me, but they disturbed me. They unsettled me. They made me feel really weird, you know? Alien is one. Alien, still to this day, it was one of my favorites as a kid. I remember like wearing out my mum's VHS copy of that because I loved it, and I still do.
That's one of my very significant ones because it was the first film I ever saw where you could have an alien as a scary monster. Every film I'd seen up to that point, or TV show with aliens in it, it was basically like just like an invading force.
Yeah.
Or like the opposing force in a war or something.
Or it was a guy in a rubber suit,
Well, irrespective of how they looked, but the idea of having like a terrifying monster, but it's an alien. That was the first time I'd seen that, and that was quite a kind of a game changer. Really.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, that was my introduction to H.R. Giger as well, who whose art I consume.
Well,
like
having the world itself seems so alien as well, not just the creature itself. You know, that was.
The ship and all of that, so brilliant.
Everything about it felt like we shouldn't be here.
Yeah, there is, there's an ickiness, isn't there? There's like there is this feeling that like, no, human, it's brilliant because it ties into the title, because the alien isn't just the alien, it's the humans, right? They're not supposed to be there. This is an environment.
That feel of something terrifying happening in a world where it doesn't really fit.
Yeah,
I think that's a form of horror in its own right. So when you're watching, I mean, I know it's not a horror film, but because we're talking about sci-fi, when you're watching Star Wars and a giant worm monster comes out of the ground, you just think, fine. This is a world where one of the main characters is a 7-foot werewolf looking thing.
Yeah, fine.
But in Alien, ostensibly, it's a very grounded film, right? Yes, it's set in space, fine. But what are they doing in space? it's like a haulage firm.
They're miners, right? They're
sorry,
miners. Yeah. They are like
very grounded, blue collar.
Yeah.
Right. And then this happened. And it feels like this isn't their world.
It's true. I mean,
this is, and that makes it scary. And another film which was very, very sort of formative for me in terms of my style and who I would become as an adult and everything, which I think does the same thing, is The Crow.
The Crow. Wow. Yeah.
Because The Crow is a film where, again, it's ostensibly a gritty crime film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except you've got a ghost in it.
You've got a ghost, right? A revenant, right?
The enemy hasn't got superpowers. It's not a superhero fight. These are normal people in a normal world who exist in quite an awful place.
Yep.
And bad things happen and they do bad things. But now there's a literal ghost in it.
It's so unusual, isn't it?
And there's a great scene, which is one of my favourite scenes in horror. And I always think, but when you have scenes that live in your head, I always think of this scene where you see that happening for real, where you see a character staring down the barrel of this realization that his world has just been shattered. Yeah. And it's when he's got he's trained up in the car.
Yeah.
And Eric's about to set fire to him. And he looks at Eric and he suddenly realizes who he is.
Yeah.
And he has a complete mental breakdown because he's like, no, you can't be you.
You
can't possibly be. And his mind just shatters. And it's brilliant to see it.
It's great, isn't it? It's because he actually says, doesn't he, that he himself must be dead.
Yeah.
If he's seeing Eric Draven, then he himself must be dead.
Like this awful, brutal, rapist gangbanger fella. And he's like a child in that moment because he's like, no. This is
everything's been broken down, right? Because it's a world which is rational, right?
It is. That's exactly my point. It's like the world of Alien. It's a world which, by and large, exists by the laws of the universe that we live in.
Yeah.
And yet here is this one variable.
Yeah.
That's been dropped in the toy box that doesn't fit. It's like you're playing with, I don't know, you're playing with G.I. Joe figures, right? And then I've stuck the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in the middle of it.
Exactly that. It's a brilliant thing. It's a really clever thing to do because it just unsettles the world, doesn't it? It just unseats the world enough.
And I love. That's my favourite scene in that film. But that I saw that film when I was about 14, and that was a very important film for me in terms of formative years as a teenager because like gothic imagery and dressing in all black and the music and the style and everything. It was like I'd always liked all of that, but couldn't really give a face to it. But suddenly there's a whole film that's bathed in that stuff.
Yeah, it's just derived from it, right? It's saturated.
It's like, oh, there's other people that like this.
Yeah,
it's so important, isn't it?
Crow really did. I mean, people often cite The Matrix, which is true, but The Crow really did kickstart an entire gothic cultural movement, didn't it?
That was the beginning of me wearing leather jackets.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't. Yeah. There was a good at least 5 years after the release of The Crow where you could not go to a Halloween or costume party where someone didn't come as Eric Draven, right?
Ironically, I've never dressed as him.
Really, that does surprise me. That does surprise me.
It just seems too obvious, George. It's just like it's the one that you'd expect me to go as. So
of course.
For that reason, Similarly, I've never dressed as Batman. Like my favourite comic book character, and I've never dressed as him because it's far too obvious. That film was a massive influence on me in terms of horror, and not necessarily in the kind of thing that I write, but just that particular feel, and it's something I try and put in my stories where everything else is normal except this one thing.
Yeah,
that's something I try and do a lot in my work because I just think there's something innately terrifying about upsetting. Again, it's like you're watching Buffy. Absolutely love Buffy, but whatever happens there, demons, werewolves, ghosts, robots, it's par for the course because that's the world they live in.
That's the world, right? It is. What Buffy reveals is like the supernatural world is the more common, right?
Yeah,
that's just what's in the world,
Yeah, so you can't really do that there, but you get something like The Crow, and it's perfect because no one knows how to handle this, and even like the good guys, like the police officer who's played by Ernie Hudson, he doesn't know how to handle this.
No, And I love
a mate of his. It was a friend of his, and now he's back, and he shouldn't be. And he just goes through it like he almost goes through it just like refusing to acknowledge it.
It's great. I mean, his response and the way it introduces this stuff to him, I love in particular because he just does it pragmatically, doesn't he?
Like at the end where they're like, right, you go in front of me and you can they can all shoot at you, and then I'll come out with my gun.
Yeah.
Just treat it purely pragmatically because what else is he gonna do? He has no other way of handling this.
Yeah, I'm not equipped to like handle this philosophically, so I'm going to handle it pragmatically. It's brilliant. It's really clever. I mean, another one for me would have definitely been the Blair Witch Project for me.
Yes, that completely upended how you could do a horror film.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's particularly significant because it was like I grew up like watching horror on VHS and on television, and my mum would go to the cinema and watch horror films and come back and tell me about them, and I was like, oh God, I so want to go to the cinema and watch a horror film.
That's a good point. You had to get to the age where you
exactly And the Blair Witch Project was the first one I went to see. It was the first one I went to see at the cinema because it was the first one I was old enough to, you know. And it was incredible. It was formative. It, like you said, it completely at that time. It's hard to describe to people because found footage is everywhere now, but they just didn't exist. They were found footage films, but people didn't know about them. They weren't they
weren't mainstream popular.
No. And this thing came along, and it was so different. It was so
also the first example I can think of like viral marketing and all of that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and that phenomena where it plays with assumptions of reality. Like the marketing was genius. You remember when they actively claimed that this was real footage or partially real footage.
Weren't allowed to be seen in public or do interviews or anything until
for a year. It was for a year. Because they wanted people to believe it was real. And there was this controversy around the time because, of course, the internet did exist, but it was really, really niche and very difficult to get into.
It wasn't like the internet as we think of it now.
God, it doesn't even like, I mean, it wasn't even like internet 0.1. It was this proto-internet back then, you know? So people didn't have the means of just going and looking up and say, "Oh well, yeah, it's false. You know, it's not real. It's a film project." People believed it. People thought it was real, or at least partially.
I don't remember ever believing it, but I remember thinking it was great. The way of thinking, the way of pretending this was fake, and the way it was real. Sorry, and set up for it was fantastic. I don't ever remember buying into it.
I don't think I ever actively bought into it, but I do recall like really allowing the fiction to take me, you know, and getting so involved in it and feeling such a profound sense of cold dread from that.
But that's another one though, isn't it, where this is a real world and something terrifying happens.
Yes, I mean the Blair Witch Project is a really real world, isn't it? Like it is documentary real, and yet there are things happening that ostensibly are probably supernatural.
Yeah, I like how it's never really confirmed either way.
Yeah,
that's particularly good.
That's what makes it work for me. I mean, there was a film released around the same era called The Last Broadcast.
Yes, I saw that.
Which is
Devil on that.
Yeah, that's the one. It's good. I mean, it's good, but it does make the mistake of dropping the ball at the end because it tells you,
explains it completely.
Exactly, tells you exactly what's going on, shows you what's going on, and it does kill it. It kills it stone dead because up until that point you are so in the dark. There's so many mysteries about what's happening here. Like, how could the documentary maker brings these things up? How could anyone have like killed these fit, strong men? You know, and not left any knife shards or anything like that. You know, how could that have happened? And in the end, it's just like, well, it's just a killer, you know. It's just him. It's like, oh, all right, fine. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually make sense when you look at like the weirdness surrounding the murders, you know.
No, I think you're supposed to kind of forget that.
Yes.
Shocked by the revelation. I think it's
and
it's like a Shyamalan sort of revelation where you're like, okay, but hang on, what about this,
that? And don't get me wrong, there are things in that film I really love. I think there are brilliant moments, and there are even though I don't like the ending, there are moments that are really scary that relate to it. Like I watched it recently, and it shows you his face, and you don't realize. There's a transition between one scene and another towards the end, and that face that comes up in the footage as Shirley, that comes up. It's in the transition, so you see him,
right?
But you don't realize.
Okay,
it's really clever. It's really, really clever, but. Even given that, I don't like that ending. I think for found footage in particular and documentary horror, I think it works better when it's ambiguous.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Although you kind of see, I think with the Blair Witch, not seeing anything at all is a good take. But I think it does still sort of, I don't know, if you accept that, if you don't want it to be supernatural. You can accept that.
Yep.
But I think it's a harder sell.
Yes.
Because you'd be like, why did they never see anyone? Where's his car?
Yeah.
Where's his tracks?
Why did they circle? They walked in the same direction for miles and miles and ended up.
It's a bit of an harder sell if you don't accept any supernatural.
Definitely. That for me is the big one. The fact that they walk for miles in the same direction and they hit the same location where they started out. That is some reality warping shit, isn't it? You know,
and that's kind of the scariest bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
getting lost and this thing being able to affect your perception to the degree that you can't find your way out. Because in a lot of things, however scary the monster is, you could just leave the situation.
Yes, right. You could just technically you could just leave the woods, right? You could
I'm in a house and I'm sure it's haunted. Just fucking leave.
Just leave, right? Yeah. Just walk out the door, right?
Yeah.
Don't investigate the scary noises. Just go outside. It's
just go.
It's the old When a Stranger Calls thing. You ever seen When a Stranger Calls? Old 1960s film. She could have just gone next door.
Yeah.
Couldn't she? It's an urban environment. It's a suburban environment. There are next door neighbours. Just go out, go next door, say, I'm getting some really weird, freaky phone calls, and I'm a bit scared. Would you come round and check things are okay with me?
Well, you see, things like that are why I think it's difficult to do horror films today when everyone's got a mobile phone in their pocket. You have to quickly establish that there's no signal or something, don't you?
It actually is difficult, isn't it? Like, things that, people are less isolated now.
Yeah.
Because of that. So you have to find a way around that. Maybe they lose their mobile phone, maybe they've got no charge on it or something, maybe the internet's down or whatever.
You've got to establish that pretty quick because otherwise, you've got that in your pocket, haven't you?
Well, how many horror films that were formative for us in the 80s and the 90s just didn't happen if that technology is available?
Yeah, yeah. You could, you quite easily remove any possibility of this happening just by having a mobile phone in your pocket.
Yeah, like the original Scream kind of doesn't happen. It kind of doesn't happen without landline telephone calls.
You see who's calling, unknown number, you don't answer it.
Just don't answer it. Then suddenly the game's up, isn't it? It's like, I can't do my set piece now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole point, is the phone call. You're not going to have the phone call, are you? Because you're like, unknown number, no thank you.
No thanks, bye. Sorry. Suddenly this elaborate set piece that the killer has created, or killers, obviously, doesn't fly anymore. That's another one, by the way. I fucking loved the original Scream. I loved it to bits.
Yeah, Sean, who you're now friends with as well, that's one of his favourite horrors.
Yeah, I love it to bits. And I think it's one of those weird films where people come to it in different ways. People who know horror come to it as a black comedy, and people who don't know horror come to it as a horror film. It's really wonderful in that regard. It's so conscious of what horror films are. It's so literate in what horror films are, and it's fun seeing those tropes and those traditions played with in such a subtle and funny way.
Yeah, well, it's very sort of self-knowing, but in a good way. It's not parody. But it's
satire, isn't it? It's like genuine down the line satire, and it works brilliantly. I think it's because I don't think any other director other than Wes Craven could have done it, to be honest.
Do you think? Okay.
I don't think anyone but Wes Craven could have done it. I think he's so keyed in, to that particular genre of horror, and so knowledgeable about it that it's exquisite. It just, everything is pinpoint down to the characterization, the dialogue, the camera shots. It's a really wonderful film, that one. But it does mark this weird transition as well, where almost the sincere slasher horror couldn't be done anymore after that.
No, I suppose not really. No. Not unless it was a deliberate throwback or something.
No, of course. I mean, of course, what you did have after that is umpteen million efforts to try and satirize the form. So you had things like I Know What You Did Last Summer. You had Cherry Falls. All of those kinds of things that tried to invert elements of the standardized slasher, but had varying levels of success.
Yeah. I think once something so effectively parodied the thing that you do without being a parody, it is quite difficult to then make an earnest version of it anymore.
Very, very hard, especially if it's so popular. If it does leach into public consciousness, as Scream did, obviously. Yes. It marked a death knell in many respects. It did mark a death knell, so horror had to transition then. It had to change into something else. Fortunately, you had the Blair Witch Project come along, which did do that. It changed into something completely other.
Yeah,
very,
that was
very
a whole
strange.
new genre then, yeah.
Did you ever have this thing? I definitely had a thing where around that time, when you start to develop critical faculty and you start to discern what is good and what is not and why.
Yes. I remember very vividly the first time I watched a film and thought, oh, bad films exist.
Yeah.
Because, again, we didn't have streaming services, we didn't have Sky, So, a film was something you'd see a very select few of.
Yeah.
Because you'd rented it, or because you owned the video, or because you'd gone to the cinema. And even if you've got a big collection, like you said your mum did, she would have curated that based on films that were worth buying. Right?
Exactly.
So the idea that there's films made that are shit just didn't register with me for quite some time. Until
likewise.
And then I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So I can
films are bad.
That realization that you can be disappointed by a film that has all the elements of things you like.
Yes.
But doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, for me, this is a contentious one because a lot of people like this film. For me, it was The Sixth Sense.
Really, that late? I remember. I think that film is good the first time you watch it. If you watch it back knowing the twist, it's actually shit because it's boring.
Actually shit.
There's nothing interesting going on at all.
It's boring, and the twist doesn't make any sense.
No, it's very stretched. It's very stretched.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Was the second Highlander film.
Oh God, it's so bad.
It shouldn't be. It's got the original writers. It's got the original cast. It's not like one of them dog shit sci-fi channels.
No, you're right.
Where it's got none of the budget, none of the
You
cast.
are right.
On paper, it should be brilliant. It
should be amazing, and it is wank, isn't it? I mean, conceptually, the concepts in it, they're aliens.
It's basically Superman. They have powers on Earth because they're on Earth, but on the home planet they don't.
Oh,
it basically turns it into a Superman thing.
Oh, it's so bad. Zeist as well. Oh God, the names of things.
Yeah, it's terrible. Everything about it is terrible. And that was the first time because I'd watched the first one and absolutely loved it. I think I watched it with my granddad actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched this. I thought, oh, there's a second one, and I'll watch that. And I just very vividly remember sitting there thinking, not only, oh, this is a crap film, but films can be crap. That was a very specific sort of revelation.
I think it is one of those things, isn't it? Because when you're younger, when you're a kid, you just don't have that faculty, do you?
No.
You just consume whatever's there, right? A film is a film is a film, and you consume it, and it was like this, and that's it. But I think it's when you start hitting double digits, isn't it?
I think start I to 12 when I watched that, and I very vividly remember that feeling of disappointment, of thinking, oh.
Something I used to like isn't very good anymore,
Yeah.
I remember having like that feeling about toy franchises. You know, when like toy franchises or cartoon franchises that you really liked come back or remade. Yes,
and they've got to a point where it's Ghostbusters in space. So.
Yeah, actually, Ghostbusters is a really good example because, like, the first season of Ghostbusters, like the real Ghostbusters, is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And then it becomes Slimer and the Ghostbusters, and the animation studio changes, and the writing team is different, and it's not as good.
No, it kind of it skews a bit younger, doesn't it? Which
it
is
does.
To say that. Well, you think the audience would have got older, and yet it's like, they're trying to get audience.
You know what also is a really good example of this? The 1990s X-Men cartoon. That's a stunner. I mean, like, I went back and rewatched that on the Disney Channel recently. That is an amazing cartoon. The stuff it talks about, the concepts and the imagery that it's dealing with are incredible for the time. I mean, oh my God, we were talking about woke, like people who are anti-woke. If the 1990s X-Men hit now, they would lose their shit. They would lose their shit because it is violently anti-fascist. This film, this cartoon series, it is violently anti-fascist, you know, but it does like that. I didn't even know there is a 5th season of it.
All right. Well, there is made one, or like
there is an actual 5th season of it that was never aired in this country for some reason. I don't know why, and it's wank. It's garbage. I don't know what happened, but like the animation studio is very different, so everything's blobby and weird. It doesn't work, and the writing is bad, and you can feel that the voice actors who've been in this show for what, like 4 or 5 seasons at this point, are losing their interest, you know?
Yeah, you can feel that. You can feel that in shows sometimes when they go on too long.
You definitely can, and it just isn't very good, sadly. It's really odd because, like, up until that point, every episode is brilliant.
Yeah, I remember the early seasons of it being really strong.
I can't believe how dark it gets. I can't believe the places it goes, the things it talks about.
It purely is, because I mean, Stan Lee invented the X-Men almost as like an allegory for like, you know, the different peoples that the Nazis had persecuted.
Exactly.
I mean Magneto straight up is a Jewish Holocaust survivor.
Right. Magneto is kind of like it personified, isn't he?
That opening sequence to the original X-Men film is one of the best moments in any superhero film. Where he's been dragged away from his parents as a kid, and he's reaching for that fence in the camp, and it all buckles inwards. And
very good.
Brilliant. The visuals on that are amazing.
What I love about, like, particularly, I mean, the film and the cartoon is, I don't know whether this is intentional, but they kind of make Magneto right a lot of the time.
Yeah, the problem with Magneto as a villain is that you kind of get his point in a way that you're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to, but it's what
they do with him, which is clever, is that he kind of becomes a Nazi himself.
Yes, he becomes a supremacist, doesn't he?
Which is he was. Feared and wanted to not, you know, and it's
absolutely. But some of the things he does, I'm totally with. Like, I mean, one of his best plans is Asteroid M.
Yeah,
it's like
have his own world away from that. Yeah,
absolutely. Fuck him. Fuck
you know. Is when you read it now, not just X-Men, but when you read comic books or things with a modern view on them, and you think, oh, I'm on the other side here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was reading recently, horror. I've got like a Marvel horror anthology, and it has a very early appearances from Mobius, right?
Oh, right.
And Mobius's sort of raison d'etre in his early appearances is to try and cure himself.
Yes.
So he's only attacking criminals because he has to feed.
It's a compulsion, isn't it? That's what people a lot of the time don't realize about Morbius. He is absolutely compelled to feed. It's like agonizing if he doesn't, right?
And he dies if he doesn't. It's a biological need. It's like you not eating, so you have to eat. But he discovers accidentally that Spider-Man's blood, because of the irradiated qualities of it, could actually be used to synthesize a cure for him.
Yes.
So he goes to Spider-Man and he's like, I need some of your blood. And Spider-Man says no.
He's a bit of a dick, isn't he? I remember that.
They end up having a fight about it. And you think, what the fuck is this, Parker? Why wouldn't you just say, no problem, mate, I'll help you out. Hold on.
Not only that,
get a transfusion.
You know, he's
not saying he needs to drain him dry.
Right.
He just needs a sample he can work with, and Parker says no.
Also,
seems so vastly out of character.
Really does, especially given that, like, you know, Parker himself is a chemist, right?
Well, have you watched the most recent Spider-Man film?
Which one is the most recent one?
With the multiverse, with all the
yes, I like that one.
The whole point of that is Peter realizes, I can fix some of these guys. The very reason that they're a villain is some sort of chemical or technological thing, which is not their fault. I can fix that, and then they'll not be villains anymore. That is Peter Parker.
That's Peter Parker, right? Yeah, he's a decent guy, right? Yeah. He's decent. That's the whole thing to Peter.
The thing with Mobius just makes absolutely no sense.
It really doesn't. I mean, they translated it into the thing with Harry in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think it is. And it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Like, Harry is dying. Harry has some sort of, like, genetic leprosy going on. You know, he's really ill and in incredible pain. And it's like, just let him have the fucking blood. You know, this is not a hard decision, mate.
No, it's really not. And you're supposed to sympathise with Peter, and you think, no,
no,
I'm sorry, but I don't agree with it.
Definitely not. It's just, I mean, in that instance, it is bad writing. It's just bad writing because, like, they need the tension
to be an antagonist. So you just have to have Peter acting in a way that's wildly out of character.
That's wildly out of character, and also where there's no reason for it. I mean, like, okay, he's having issues with his blood. He doesn't know what it can do. Well, Harry owns Oscorp.
Yeah.
Let's get this down to the labs, have a look at the blood so that they can synthesize some sort of cure.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it seems so odd that it'd be against that.
It just does not. It is convenient writing, isn't it? Like in a really bad way. You know, sometimes you can get away with that. It's fine, especially in comic books. You can get away with that. But when it's so blatant and when it's like the characters wouldn't act that way.
That's the point, isn't it? It's when you're reading that as a fan of that character and you think he would do that.
Yeah,
that's not how he'd act in this situation.
It's just odd.
Very odd.
And when there are so many, like, ways out of the situation that doesn't involve Harry becoming the Green Goblin, you know, it's
all they would have needed in the Morbius situation is to say, in order to synthesize a cure, I need all of your blood.
Yeah.
Just that slight adjustment.
Slight adjustment, and suddenly you're all on Peter's side, right? It's like, well, I'd have to die. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's all it would take. And you think, I get why he's against this.
Yes, I can kind of understand here.
Yeah, but he doesn't ask for that, so it seems odd that he's objecting.
It's really weird, isn't it? It is Morbius is one of those really interesting characters that you can do a lot with, you know, because he's so.
But then we got that film.
Oh God Almighty! Yeah, Jesus Christ! I mean, wow, right? Just wow.
It's strangely bad. You know when you.
It is oddly bad. Yeah.
Oh, and don't get me. I wrote a whole post about this, about the end credits scene, where the Vulture turns up.
Yeah.
How? Why? Why is he there? How is he in that dimension?
Yeah.
I can imagine. This is what I wrote in my Facebook post about this. I can imagine the corporate method by which that scene came to pass, right?
Yeah.
Where some Sony executive said to the film writers, put the Vulture in at the end so that he's travelled to this universe and now we can team up with Morbius because we've got the rights to the Vulture.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, but that doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense.
The reason the characters from our films jumped to the Disney films is because they knew Spider-Man's identity and they were being sucked into his reality by it. There's no reason for the Vulture to suddenly arrive in Morbius's dimension.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you can do what we want now because it's multiverse. And they're like, no, but that's not how this works. You don't understand. And they're like, oh, just fucking write it, nerd.
Just do it.
That's exactly what the conversation will have been to get in there.
Yeah.
It's people who don't understand the concepts that they're now in charge of.
Absolutely true.
Forcing these decisions in because there is no reason for the Vulture to be there. It doesn't make any sense.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, that's another weird experience I think that people do have as they get older, where they start to realize like the stuff, the media, the franchises that they like are often so horribly compromised.
Well, when you can see the strings, when you start being able to see the strings, and you can see you can almost see the corporate notes on the script.
Yeah, it's again, for me, another big one with that is video games. Obviously, so many great video game franchises have been utterly destroyed by corporate interference. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think once you start to see the strings, you have to almost kind of stop yourself from it. Yeah. But yeah, like there's some stuff. I'm not going to go into this partly because I need to go shortly. But also,
of course.
But we're doing a separate podcast about Buffy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a lot of stuff in Buffy where you think you made this decision or someone forced you to, and you clearly don't like it because now you spend 3 episodes walking it back.
Walking it back, yes.
There's quite a bit of that in Buffy where you can realise, you see that, now you're trying to undo this because you didn't want to, your hand was forced.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that. The big reset button, right?
Yeah.
That's one of my... I know that it's kind of innate to comic book mythology these days, but I hate it.
Well, that's why I've always preferred DC comics to Marvel, because DC stuff tends to stick.
Yeah.
When someone, I mean, obviously Superman death being the classic one that didn't, but it was never going to. It's Superman.
No, it's Superman.
But mostly when a character dies, their death has some lasting significance.
Yes.
You know? Or when like someone's grown up and now they've adopted a new identity, that tends to stay the case.
Yep.
You know, they tend to be much better at that, DC, with Marvel does. When anything happens in Marvel, like, this guy's Captain America now, I always say, give it 6 months.
Give it, I mean, that's one of the reasons I kind of bowed out of Spider-Man comics at one point when I was younger, because I was just like, I was really invested in. It was the Clone Saga actually, which people really hate. You know, people really hate.
That was my era as well. Yeah.
I loved the Clone Saga. I'll be honest. I thought it was really interesting. I loved what they were doing with Peter. You know, he was grown up. He was married. He was
married. She was pregnant. It was
Love all that. The tension between him and Ben. You know, brilliant. I loved that. Introducing all of these really adult dynamics for the classic villains. You know. Brilliant. And then what do they do at the end? They get cold feet and they hit the big reset button. They bring Norman Osborn back. Doesn't make any fucking sense.
It was all Norman Osborn's.
It's plan. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Like, and the way they walked back all the stuff with Judas Traveler, you know, who is like this god who we've seen
but then you said actually he's just a mutant.
He's just a mutant and he can cast illusions. Fuck you. I remember reading that as a late teenager. I think I was like 17 and going, fuck you at the comic. You know, it's like, that is
such a cop-out.
It is such fucking garbage, right?
Yeah,
it's such fucking garbage. And Ben Reilly turns out to... It's like, no, that doesn't make sense either. That doesn't make sense either. They haven't
Ironically, that for that plan of Osborn's to have worked, it's like real life conspiracy theories and why it's so clearly not real, because so many people had to be in on it. Right. Never say a word, never fuck up.
I know.
For that 2 decades.
And there were so many people involved. There were like entire cults, weren't there? There were entire cults dedicated to the Green Goblin. And nobody slipped up? Nobody had an attack of conscience at one point and went to Peter and said, look, man, something freaky is going on here.
Exactly. You know? That's why it doesn't work, because there's to be far too many people who'd have to be in on it in order for it to... Yeah.
You know, the big one for me, it was Scryer. You know, Scryer, he turned up and he was so mysterious and clearly metaphysical, some weird influence in the universe, right? No, he's just like a creation of Norman Osborn. He's just a guy in a costume. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
He really just had to kind of forget all this. It's like on Scooby-Doo, going back to Scooby-Doo. When you watch the first scene with the ghost on it, they're blatantly flying.
Yes,
and going through walls, and doing all this supernatural stuff, and yet at the end it's just a guy in a sheet running down a corridor, and you think, hang on, I saw him fly through a wall.
Yeah, I saw him flying. It doesn't work like he didn't have any feet coming out of the bottom or anything, you know.
And this is the same as the like Judas Traveler and the Scryer character, who he looked a bit like the Emperor from Star Wars, didn't he?
Yes, he did, yeah.
And it was like, no, hang on. I've literally seen this guy warping reality. How are you telling me that just a bloke in a mask now?
It doesn't make any sense. There's a scene like early on where Scryer appears to Spider-Side, you know, the clone of Peter, and he like gives him a revelation. He touches him, and there's like this revelation where like Spider-Side suddenly knows who he is because like the Jackal has kind of like warped his mind, so he doesn't really know who he is or what he's doing. Scryer removes all of that with a magical touch.
Yes.
You have to ignore all of that.
Yeah.
All of that. It doesn't make a lick of sense, and it's so sad because all that stuff is so cool and interesting.
Yeah, also, a lot of the time, like Scryer and Travelers seem to be trying to undermine what the Jackal is doing, as if they've got some grander purpose for all this.
Yep.
And yet, then the revelation that all of them actually work for Osborn. That makes no sense.
Doesn't make a lick of sense. It really doesn't. And you can tell that wasn't what they wanted to do.
No, the end result of that was going to be that I think, I'm just making this up as a reader, but I think that Ben Reilly was the real Spider-Man all along.
Yeah.
That's what they were going to go with. And meanwhile, Peter Parker, there was some sort of cosmic plan for that clone, which could be allowed because he's not technically real. So they would use him in whatever their cosmic thing was that they were doing, Scryer and Traveler. There's some loophole where they can use him because he's not a real human or something.
Yeah.
Or something like that, which would take him off into adventures of a more Doctor Strange kind or something.
Yes, I think you're probably right there. I think you're probably right. And all that stuff, that ancillary stuff they did where they followed Ben Reilly during the years he was away.
That was great.
That was really so great. Good, right?
And then he had Kane as well.
Kane.
Character.
Wow. His arc was fabulous, wasn't it?
Yeah, really, really good character. Really good character.
Really good character.
Peter Parker, who would he be without the nice upbringing?
Yeah.
Who would he be without the friends?
If he were really bad, if he were like really damaged, really twisted. I loved what they did with Kane, where they perverted the spider powers. So like where Ben and Peter use the power to climb up walls, he uses it to pull them down.
Yes.
That stuff.
And even just he puts it down on someone's face and it just like rips the skin.
Oh, the mark of Cain. Yeah.
He's also massively stronger than both of them because his powers. It's almost like because the cloning process went badly wrong. It's almost like when you're picking your stats for a character.
Yeah.
It's almost like more of it went into strength and less into agility or something.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much that. And I mean, the stuff he does to Ben as well when they're he's chasing him.
Peter is his brother, and he doesn't want Ben coming along and revealing that he's real and ruining Peter's life. Because Peter is kind of living vicariously through Peter, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he sees a clone doing well, having the life that he kind of wants. That's kind of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was great reading it. All of that as again formative stuff. Your early experiences, seeing that comic books could do this, could take characters, move them on like that, only to then throw it all away and just go back to.
Well, the reason I started reading the comics because I really liked the 1990s Spider-Man and X-Men cartoons, and I picked up just a random Spider-Man comic at the local newsagents, and it was one of the early Clone Saga stories.
Yes,
that was it.
Same here, yeah. Or just before it, where you kind of had Ben kind of a couple of glimpses of this guy that you didn't know who it was. And there was other stuff going on at the time, and then it slowly built up to revealing him. That's the kind of era I was reading to start with.
And I must admit, I was so invested. I was so invested in the Clone Saga. It was so interesting, and every issue was really interesting. And then the last few issues occur, and I stopped reading it.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a temper tantrum, I'll be honest. I was really, really annoyed.
One scene from that which I do like, because I've always liked the thing that Parker is actually same as Superman really, but Spider-Man, his personality is the reason he's not as dangerous as he could be.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of times where he snaps, and I do quite like that. And there is a scene in the story. Unfortunately, it's a story where Osborn is revealed to be.
Yeah.
But what happens is that Mary Jane is pregnant and she goes into early labour because the baby's irradiated. Norman Osborn kidnaps her and prevents her going to hospital, and they subsequently lose the baby.
Yeah.
Peter nearly fucking kills him.
Yeah.
He tracks him down, smashes through the wall of his office, and just beats him like almost to death.
Yeah.
And Osborn's trying to fight back, and he hasn't got a prayer. And it's like, this is what Peter could do if he was Batman rather than Spider-Man.
There's a couple of instances like that in the Clone Saga, isn't there, where he does lose it.
Yeah, I like seeing that, because you see when the character's pushed, what they could actually do, and it makes you appreciate their personality. Definitely. I mean, like, when he believes he is the clone, like, he loses his identity, doesn't he? He like goes off with the Jackal at one point. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And beats the Punisher half to death, I do believe.
Yes, he does, because again, you realise how easily he could take down a lot of these villains and stuff if he wasn't trying not to hurt them.
Right. If he was more like Kane, I suppose, if he had no parameters.
They even do that on one of the films, where just showing you just how strong he is without meaning to be. When Flash Thompson steals his foot, and he's trying to get it back off him, and he accidentally taps Flash on the side of the head, and he knocks him flat out.
Yeah.
just like that. He's just like done. And just from a slight tap on the side of the head. And you think, Peter could fucking kill most people if he wanted to.
What kind of villain would Spider-Man himself be if he really went, if he really went off the deep end?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to actually hit him.
Yeah. He's agile and strong, isn't he? He's
to throw a bus at you if he wants to, but he's also insanely hard to hit, which is unusual for strong characters. Usually they're quite slow moving.
Yes.
And
and he's smart, right? He's also really, 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 really smart. So he would have like the Batman contingencies going on and everything.
Yeah, as a villain, he'd be a very terrifying character, but I don't think they'd ever have gone down that route of making him a villain. But whatever the plan was with Traveller and Scryer and all that, they obviously never.
They got cold feet. That's the truth of the matter. They got cold feet. They realised that they thought that people aren't going to like the fact that this Spider-Man isn't Peter Parker, and that things are changing and so on. So let's just hit that big old reset button and put it all back.
I feel like, just final thought on this, I kind of feel like if that had been DC, I feel like it would have stuck to being better.
It would have stuck a little bit, yeah. I mean, I have picked up some of the comics since, and they even make like mocking reference to the Clone Saga, and it's like, oh, fuck off,
Yeah, I've seen that.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
In the artwork, everything was really
good. I think so too. It's generally derided these days, but I really liked the Clone Saga. I thought it was where Spider-Man was growing up a little bit, Yeah.
But there is a genuine Marvel diktat now, which Michael Straczynski has spoken about, which is that Marvel have this thing now where Spider-Man, I don't know how long this has been going on, but Spider-Man is not allowed to move beyond sort of high school.
Oh,
you know what I mean? That basically what. If there's a story that takes him out of that, at the end of it, there has to be some sort of reset.
You see, I hate that.
I do.
I hate that.
Yeah.
It means the character can't ever change, right?
But pretty much, there is a legitimately like a diktat around it. Yeah.
Wow, that's a real shame. That is a real shame, because it kind of makes you not want to read any Spider-Man stories, right?
Because nothing that happens with. That's what I said to you when I lent you them Venom books, because they're absolutely fantastic. But
really good.
But 3 years from now, Eddie Brock will just be a villain again.
That's gonna hurt.
Yeah,
that's gonna hurt, because I loved the character development and the relationships in those books. I loved it.
Yeah, that scene where he's talking to Spider-Man and he's like, "We're too old for this shit." Past it,
it's lovely. It's a really sweet thing. I thought it was brilliant. I loved the relationship between Eddie and Peter in those books. I loved it to bits.
I thought you would, which is why I lent it to you.
Yeah, thought it was brilliant. I mean, they handled Carnage really well as well. It's who's a difficult one to write.
I am going to have to shoot because I think my food's just arrived.
No worries, man. No worries. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Lex Jones, ladies and gents. If you want to come on again, Lex, you're more than welcome, man.
Anytime. I'm very happy to. Thank you.
By the way, links to all of Lex's stuff down below, by the way, guys. See you, man.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.